Sometimes I'm getting, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir, then again I'm falling. Sometimes I'm getting, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir, then again I'm falling. Let Jesus work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Oh, work it out. You work it out for Mother Lisa. Sometimes I'm getting, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir, then again I'm falling. Sometimes I'm getting, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir, then again I'm falling. Let Jesus work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. my soul you keep. But you die before away. I pray to the Lord, my soul you take. Every night I lay to sleep. I pray to the Lord, my soul you keep. But you die before away. I pray to the Lord, my soul you take.
All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos. And tonight we have a fun and exciting open panel. The link is already in the video description. So shout out to all the regulars. Please go ahead and hop on. We don't have much of an opening monologue today. We're going to be discussing where is the line in the sand. I was going to fit Orthodox Christians in there, but we can speak more generally for people in regards to some of the globalist endeavors and plans that we know are in place and certainly being erected right now. So I'm going to hit on a few to give a sort of opening monologue, at least on the topic, but I just want to let everybody know, feel free, go ahead and start joining. I'm going to, again, the link is in the video description. Here it is as well. And so, yeah, it should be a fun conversation tonight. As you guys know, I was actually spent the weekend up in Michigan. A few people you might be familiar with, Andrew and Rachel Wilson, got baptized into the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Orthodox Church this past weekend. They are newly illuminated. Congratulations to them and their two daughters. I was able to meet up with them and Chase Haggard and Zen Shapiro and his family. And we had a real fun time over the weekend. And shout out to everybody I met at their parish up in Michigan. Really appreciate you guys. So we had a lot of fun. So if you see Rachel or Andrew, make sure you tell them congratulations and welcome them home to the true church. I know that was a big thing for them, and they were both really excited. And I was glad to be able to spend the time with them. So we had a fun weekend, but now we're back. Obviously, with the Super Bowl happened, the big old football games on Sunday. And I thought, what would be a good topic for an open panel? I came up with something that we actually discussed in our think tank. So for premium members on my website, we meet twice a month and basically just kind of throw around topics and have a free flowing conversation. So this was actually one that we brought up the last conversation or two, the last two meetings, and where exactly is the line that some of us won't cross? Because as we bring up some of these topics today, not all of them are technically sinful, if you will, but some of them are more flexible. All of them are moving in the same direction. Here's a few that I have. Of course, we know about the mask mandates that happened in 2020. If they were to issue another one, is that a line in the sand for some people? We'll ask some of the panel members once they join. I would suspect that many people are more aware about the inability for surgical masks to stop viruses in general, but who knows? And at the same time, are you willing to capitulate to fly out an airplane, to travel, to go to a hospital? Maybe your parents or your wife or a loved one is sick. You got to go to a hospital. Where is the line in the sand? Obviously, I don't think um, abiding by that rule is sinful in and of itself, but that one might be something people are be able to be flexible with. The jabs, we know that was obviously essentially a medical mandate in the Western world to participate in many of the societal functions. That is a no-go for me. So that is a line in the sand for me. I know some people in the chat, they may have got one or two of those, and maybe they've changed their mind or altered course. I'm curious to know where people are on that. And again, if anybody comes on, please use politically correct terminology so that we don't set anything off. I'm actually getting ready to delete. I re-aired. So for the last stream I did, I was covering the Tucker Carlson and Vlad the Impaler Putin's interview, and that got taken down. So while I was live, people started telling me that some of the other Orthodox content creators, their streams got taken down when they were streaming that interview. Well, I went ahead and shut it off on Church of the Eternal Logos and kept streaming it over on my other YouTube channel, David Patrick Harry, and it got flagged and they took it down. Now, by the time I got off the stream, Tucker had already posted the full interview to YouTube. And what was really interesting is that the video on the old YouTube channel, David Patrick Harry, was reinstated and it was monetizable. I was like, wow, that's interesting. So it seems like YouTube was not real happy with the interview, but once Tucker uploaded it, it seems like they kind of let things go. So I've re-uploaded that full thing to the YouTube channel, but I'm actually going to delete it today. So if you wanted to see my overview of the Tucker and Putin interview, I highly recommend going over to Rockfin, because I'm going to be deleting that off the YouTube channel, because I've been having weird things going on with my Gmail accounts. I've had this huge website problem. So shout out to some of the website members I've emailed. If you are not getting emails from my website, you most likely have a Gmail account. Something's going on there. So oh my gosh, it was a nightmare. Like last week or the ending of the week before, I updated all these plugins on my website. So WordPress site has plugins. And all of a sudden, multiple members of my website, long-term members, just disappeared, totally gone from the database. No evidence that they were ever members. It was like the weirdest thing. So we had to reset my site back to January 30th. However, some of the people, if you've signed up since January 30th, go double check that your account's still there, because if not, email me. We need to figure out, I can refund the money. You may need to sign up. I'll refund the money, but we have to work around that. So just throwing that out there for anybody who might be having some website problems. But anyways, I digress. So the Putin Tucker thing's going to get deleted, and just trying to play it safe over here on YouTube. We know how things are. So in regards to where the line is in the sand, obviously digital IDs is a hot topic. And for anybody who's familiar with what's going on in Greece, or if you have any Greek friends, you would know that unfortunately, Greece is one of the first countries that is basically has to get these digital IDs to participate in society. This is for healthcare. This is for economic activity. This is basically to be a Greek citizen and utilize the state system. You're going to have to get one of these digital IDs. Now, is that a sin in and of itself? That's what we're going to be talking about today, because not necessarily. Now, we all know where these digital IDs and passports are moving towards, obviously, and that is a full centralized control of your health, your economic life, your social media, your travel. Everything is going to be monitored by a sort of digital grid system. But if you have a family, if maybe you say you own a plumbing company and you support your family and you're able to live a lifestyle that you want, is it sinful for, let's say, for a theoretical thought experiment, an Orthodox Christian who owns, say, a construction company or a plumbing company, that they'll have to start taking payment within using like Fed Reserve CBDCs? Not necessarily. Now, obviously, at the same point, we could know where all this is going. So that's kind of the question today. Where exactly is the line in the sand? Is it the CBDCs, right? For some of us, we'll have to use them. For some of us, if you participate in making money online, I'll probably have to get paid in CBDCs. Is that a sin? I'm curious. Maybe some people want to make an argument that it is. Some, I imagine some don't. At the same point, we could imagine a potential scenario. This is total speculation, but what if there's a scenario in which basically all metropolitan areas in the United States are on 15-minute grid cities? Everything is already digitally hooked up, including your health record, your social media, your bank account, everything. And outside of that system, people are not on it. They're not necessarily, it's not like the military is going to go around and annihilate everybody. So they're going to have to be some sort of parallel system. And it makes you think that maybe BRICS, maybe this alternative global currency, maybe this is going to be the option for some of us. Well, that'd be a wild future. Imagine that maybe 60% of the countries using Fed Reserve CBDCs and 30 to 40% is not on that system and they're using BRICS currency. Maybe it's gold back. Maybe it's something different. Maybe it's a different, who knows, right? Is that a line in the sand? Digital health passports, they're going to be necessary for all travel. Are some people going to say that's a line in the sand and basically just set up shop wherever you're at in the world, be it in the North America or in Europe or wherever you're at? Is that going to be your option? Is that a line in the sand for you? I know a line in the sand for me specifically, and I saw somebody mention this in the live chat here, is anything that goes under the skin. So we're talking about any sort of jibby jab or any RFID chip. That is if you're not familiar with an RFID chip, that's just a radio frequency identification. Those are those little things that are being put in people's hands so that they can pay, they can use their credit card, they can, get into private security doorways with just the movement of their hand because there's a chip inserted. Now, for me, I would argue as an Orthodox Christian, once we're starting to talk about things getting placed under the skin, we're certainly moving towards the mark of the beast. Am I saying that is what it is? I don't know. Obviously, economic commerce and being able to participate in a global system, that is certainly what it seems like the book of Revelation is indicating when it talks about the mark of the beast, either on the forehead or the hand. And we could see RFID chips certainly lead us there. So for me, that is absolutely a line in the sand. Jibby jabs. But what about electric cars? All these incentives. If you guys aren't aware, the state of California is basically going to ban combustion engines by the year 2035. So that's basically 10 years. In 10 years, they want to do away with combustion engines, so oil-based engines, in favor of electric vehicles. Yet at the same time, as anybody's looked into it knows, that electric vehicles put a enormous stress on the grid, which is powered by coal, and really doesn't do the thing that we're told that it does. I personally am never going to get an electric car. I know friends that they have Teslas, they like them, they have other cars, that's fine. I'm not even trying to criticize the car makers or the electric cars. I'm just saying for myself, I don't plan on ever getting an electric car, have no interest in it. 15-minute city lockdowns. That's something that's already been speculated. We've seen multiple test cities already emerge, both in Europe, and I know Cleveland, Ohio was one here in the United States. Is that a line in the sand? Public schools. This might not be one that people initially thought of, but that's one for me, as we've seen where public education has gone. For me, my children, they're not going to any sort of public education or public school system. So homeschooling or private schooling is of central importance. And in relation to that, um, maybe if I have kids and they're into athletics or something like that, maybe we go to a private school, maybe a Catholic school for high school so that they could participate in sports. But certainly up until high school, they're going to be homeschooled. Is the meat and carbon tax that is being theorized to be put into place in the near future, is that a line in the sand for some people? So anyways, I ask all this. We're going to dive into everything. The panel is now open, so anybody who wants to join can join. Please do so. Mods, if you can share that link, if you will. I'll share that again in the chat. Join the stream. So if you want to hop on the open panel, feel free to join the stream right there. Would greatly appreciate it. Now, before we get into everything, again, want to tell everybody that if you want to support my work, one of the best things you can do is become a website member. The website is back on. Everything is in place right now. We're having no problems as of now. So go to the website, get your logo subscription for exclusive video content, of which anything I take down off the YouTube channel goes up on the website, so you can see it there. If you want to join the Logos Think Tank, the COTEL Crew Think Tank, that is a $25 membership, and I promise you will feel like you get your money's worth with the conversations we have. So if that's something that interests you and you would like to support my work, please do so using that link right there. Would greatly appreciate that. And if anybody wants to sign up for any one-on-one sessions, you can do so with this link right here. Would greatly appreciate that as well. Let me exit that out. There we go. So that is how you would purchase a one-on-one session. We can talk about anything that you like. Could be goal setting. Could be I've had a couple guys that just want accurate criticisms of their life and maybe where they should go next. Or we can get into philosophy, theology, anything you'd like to talk about. And then also, if you'd like to sponsor a stream, I'm expecting to get a sponsored stream up this Thursday, which we'll be tackling the mass migration period in the Roman Empire and how it falls into the general collapse of the Roman Empire. And that should be an interesting conversation. I don't have that research done yet. I got a busy day tomorrow, but I hope to have it done by Thursday evening. So hopefully Thursday evening, we will have that one wrapped up. And then also, if you guys want to, so if you would like to support the work through some merchandise, feel free to go over to the store here on YouTube. We got merchandise over there. And of course, we have stuff on the website. If you click on shop, we got a bunch of merchandise over there. There'll be a few great ways to support my work. Also, tonight, if you'd like to send in some super chats, ask some comments, we're going to address all of those as we move forward. Please use Streamlabs or Dono Chat, or if you prefer to use YouTube, feel free to use YouTube. If we have anybody out there feeling a little generous, feel free to gift some COTEL Crew memberships. That's always a great way. Here's Rachel. Rachel's in the chat. She says, so glad you made it up, DPH. Well, thank you, Rachel and Andrew, for inviting me. Had a great time up at your place in Michigan. We had a lot of fun. It was great to see Chase and Zen as well. So God bless you guys. Welcome home to the Wilsons. Welcome to the arena as well. Things actually tend to not get easier, but at least you're in the right place. And I met their priest and went to their church. It was a great time. So thank you so much, Rachel, for that. Really appreciate it. But if you want to support the stream tonight, guys, please send in any comments or questions using Streamlabs or Dono Chat. Would greatly appreciate that. Looks like we got one super chat already came in from Young Old Boy. Throws in $2 Canadian and says, these new B-Dive Johns be bussin'. Well, thank you very much. Those are actually some older ones I haven't played in a while. those are old B-Dive. Those are like at least the second two are some of the oldest ones that I have from him. But shout out to B-Dive and the incredible work he does. I was going to reach out to him to see about making a new ortho beat. I got some more footage potentially for another video. But we'll see. I know he's a busy man. He's got things going on, but B-Dive does great work. Shout out to B-Dive and everything he does. So thank you so much, young old boy, for that support. Really appreciate you, my man. And guys, so let me open up the panel here again. It's open. So if anybody wants to hop on, please do so. If curious where again your guys' lines in the sand are, just looking at the chat here. What are your guys' general take on it all? I'm curious. Somebody hop on here. Where are all the regulars? Young old boy, why don't you hop on, bro? Crispy. Why don't Crispy hop on? Keenan hop on. Somebody. Normally we got 3 or 4 people waiting. Rachel says, laugh out loud. I would, but half my face is numb and I look like I had a stroke. Well, that's a perfect time for you to come on, Rachel. Oh, she said she had 3 fillings 2 hours ago. That's a perfect time to come on. Would love to see your stroke laden face here on YouTube. I'm sure that would go great with everybody, especially all the haters and detractors. So anyways, guys, waiting on somebody to hop on. I've already kind of laid out again my stance on where the line in the sand is in regards to my basic ones are the jabs, RFID chips, and electric vehicles in public schools. So I can imagine a future scenario in which I'll have to use CBDCs. I can imagine a future scenario where we'll probably have to have digital IDs. I speculate, one of the things that I speculate about, and again, curious on people's opinions, so please join, about the internet. And so I speculate that the internet as we know it is obviously a threat to the system. And this is one of the reasons why censorship is at an all-time high regarding content all over the internet. But I wouldn't be surprised. Again, speculation here. I don't know anything about the future. I don't know any more than you guys do. But certainly it's possible that the internet goes down as we know it, and the new internet would be the Starlink system. Why is it that Elon Musk is still getting all these federal grants and incentives to shoot up all these Starlink satellites in low orbit? It seems to me that they're moving towards, it's not just a private company, because why would the US government and other governments be so interested in supporting Starlink? I imagine that Starlink may in fact be the new internet. And so when they shut down the internet that we have now, that they will limit our access to various sites until, well, really forever. But using Starlink, it's going to be much more centrally controlled. And so it's not going to be the same internet ecosystem that we exist in today. But yeah, where's Baron Strawberry? Why doesn't Baron Strawberry hop on? Where's the Baron? Evan says, DPH, do you think the world would benefit if the internet was destroyed right now forever? Ooh, that's an interesting question. That's an interesting question because the internet's working in 2 ways. Obviously, it's the sort of catalyst for this demonic metastasization of cancer around the planet. At the same point, we're able to do what we're doing now and spread information, which is clearly the biggest threat to the system. So I'm not sure which way it would go. Obviously, it'd make it much more difficult to communicate outside of your local area. But at the same point, that would certainly hamper the way that propaganda, and especially the young people, the Gen Zs, the people that don't have a fully formed neofrontal cortex, are being influenced by the internet and influencers and TikTok and all this different stuff. So I could see it going both ways. It definitely put a hamper on my business, that's for sure. I'd have to figure out a new way to make money. But interesting thought nonetheless. Thanks for that, Evan. And young old boy throws in another $2. He says, "Dang, I'm bike riding through snow while listening." Well, I appreciate the perseverance, young old boy. Bike riding through the Canadian snow. Always appreciate that. And thank you again for the $2 super chats. Maybe whenever you make your destination, you can hop on. So, guys, again, somebody, if you have any thoughts on this topic today, feel free to hop on. Right here's the link again. Jesse, Melly, Shay, somebody, anybody got ideas or comments on these topics, feel free to hop on. The panel is fully open right now. The link is in the video description. It's also now in the live chat. All you have to do is click the link. It'll take you to StreamYard. Make sure your camera and your microphone's hooked up, and you'll be able to pop on. So, well, yeah, absolutely. The universities have an incredible negative influence. But without the internet, the universities are still local. So without the internet, they can't really spread. That's why historically they spread through texts, books, academics, and that type of thing. Welcome, Ortho Cuber, to the COTEL crew. Enjoy your new emojis, my brother. Thank you so much for the support. Really appreciate that. Enjoy the new emojis. God bless you, brother. Shay said, "Sorry, DPH. I'm 8 months pregnant, and it took me 20 minutes to get comfortable in this position. Definitely not getting up anytime soon." Well, hey, that's understandable, Shay. I do understand that. Never been pregnant myself, but I can imagine. So God bless you and the family. Congratulations on the pregnancy. The little one should be popping out here pretty soon then if you're 8 months pregnant. So I imagine you probably got some swollen feet and such. So understandable. Rebecca said, "I think homeschooling will be attacked soon. It's already illegal in many countries in Europe, from what I understand." Yes, it is illegal in Europe. I know specifically in Germany. I believe England still allows homeschooling, but many countries in continental Europe do not allow you to homeschool. And so that was again something I mentioned with my fiance, is that we are homeschooling our children. That's just a fact. And obviously, it's much easier to do that in the United States than other countries, although the United States has its own drawbacks in certain ways as well. So, yeah, I've already heard, again, a lot of the massive boom in homeschool. I don't know if you've seen the latest statistics on it. I mean, it's larger now than it's ever been, I guess, before public schools, because the homeschooling was obviously popular back then. But it is on the massive growth right now. It's massive upside. Ortho Cuber just came to COTEL crew member, says the answer is no. The internet is a large part of Orthodoxy spreading. That's also true. Keenan, come on, man. He says, "I'm pregnant too, DPH. Can't hop on." Man, I don't even want to know how you got pregnant, Keenan. But you're killing me. You guys are killing me. Nobody can hop on. Nobody has any ideas on hey, Joseph. He says the internet has a negative impact on children because those kids are lousy parents. Well, that's true. Jose, my man, dude, I've been waiting for you.
All right. I wasn't going to come on, but then I saw no one was coming on, and I was like, I don't want to leave you hanging.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, I thought it was a good topic today. I thought more people would be interested on saying where their line in the sand was, but apparently not.
I mean, I was just going to refer to, what do you call it, to electric cars. I mean, in terms of where my line on the sand on that one is. So I spent years electrifying bicycles. And I like what you can do with batteries and motors on bicycles, because like it's just a perfect match made in heaven. But the thing is, once you get a battery above a certain size. So I'll put it this way: like you get a 0.5 kilowatt-hour battery on a bicycle, like which I did do once, just for what's the word I'm looking for, like just to see if you could do it. So I built a bicycle with an effective range of 120 miles on it, with the top speed in excess of 60 miles per hour, because it was essentially a legal motorcycle. But the thing is, once you get a battery that big, the risk is not even it burning. It's if you get a chain reaction, it off gases, then you have an explosion risk, because a 0.5 kilowatt hour release like 6,000 liters of explosive gases, like in a couple seconds. And and that can go boom. So that's just half a kilowatt hour. Take a Tesla where you got like an 80 kilowatt hour battery. That's 160 times as much gas off gassing in seconds, and that can go boom. And that's why I do not, and I refuse to live in row homes anymore, because I had neighbors, within the row homes who had, Teslas, and I'm fine with someone else having a Tesla in their house that can go boom. I just don't want to be living in a housing unit that's right next door to a guy who can, go boom.
Right. Well, I've seen that happening a few times. There's already on record the cars exploding, catching on fire and stuff. But even for me, a line in the sand is just that it leads into the economy where you can't own anything. And I watched a video of Tesla. They kind of posted the video as I think it was on X or some social media, but it was them basically repoing a car because the guy bought it and then wasn't making his payments. And all they did was he was in his house and they just drove it back to the plant. And it's like, and I'm not in favor of like not paying for something that you purchase or anything like that. My point is just, I think that's really scary in regards to the amount of control another person or entity has over your vehicle. And the, cars in America has always been like a symbol of freedom. And it seems like the electric cars are sort of collapsing that, undermining that symbol, even though people probably aren't totally conscious of it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And even Zero Motorcycles is the worst offender currently. They're the leader in electric motorcycles. And so they have a thing where essentially, you already have stuff on your motorcycle and you can pay up to like $6,000 to unlock stuff that is already on the bike. And the fun part is if you sell that bike to someone else, they actually have to repay those $6,000 to unlock all those features because it's tied to the person, not to the actual vehicle.
Wow.
So that's just how insane it is. It's essentially microtransactions, electronic art style.
Right. Well, I want to welcome Andrew and Petrogarde to the conversation. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
You guys got any thoughts? Either one of you can go on the topic at hand today in regards to where the line in the sand is. And obviously, if you're talking about anything controversial, just use, different terms if you could help that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a topic I think about a lot because of what I do for a living. I do cybersecurity, and a lot of times, especially in locations like healthcare or state government or even the federal side, a lot of people just want to implement technologies without really thinking about the long-term implications,
Right.
like throwing citizen data up into the cloud or personal healthcare information into the cloud. And it's kind of scary in some of the jobs I've worked and positions I've been in where it's like these unelected people can just decide where the data of all the citizens of the state go. And a few good people end up keeping it out of, these large cloud data centers where, it can be accessed by these megacorps. And so I think one of my lines in the sand is also making sure that the place I work is not, doing stuff that I just completely morally can't agree with.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. Just checking. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, can hear you good, man.
Awesome. Yeah. So my line in the sand was kind of drawn during the lockdown there. It partially is actually what drove me into Orthodoxy too, because immediately after everything there is when the first time I stepped into a Orthodox parish, and soon after I've been Orthodox almost a year now. So, but the lines that actually stopped me going to the Protestant church that I was going to was actually forced masks in church.
Yep.
So, and then up here in Canada, things were very, very bad. Like with the trucker stuff and everything, with bank accounts being frozen, with people just losing things that they thought, oh, the government's never going to touch things like that. But
yeah, like the bank account.
Yeah, but so yeah, no jab, no mask. Specifically, when mandated by the government, if it's the church leaderships that's saying something, that's completely different. Like you've got to obey your bishop.
Right.
But when the church is being told by the government, you've got to do something, specifically when there's provisions in law that says anyone who specifically in Canada, there's a criminal statute that says those who interrupt the order and solemnity of the service, that's a criminal offense. And if you try to arrest someone, either like a pastor or a priest or someone going to or from their officiating duties as clergy, that's also a criminal offense, and that was just completely ignored.
Right. Yeah, I want to bring up AI as well, because this was a big topic in our group chat. But Logan Daly actually just gifted 5 COTEL Crew memberships. Thank you so much to Logan Daly. He's been very generous in supporting the stream, and I just want to welcome all the new members. Welcome Benjamin. Welcome Morai, Belinda. Welcome Solomon, Snagglebeast, and Oberoth to the COTEL Crew. Really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much, Logan Daly, for the support, man. Really appreciate everything you do. So in regards to AI, this was something because in our think tank, a gentleman is an architect, and he was talking about how fellow architects and coworkers are basically losing the skill to draw, and that the entire industry is moving towards a dependency on AI and using AI to create all the schematics and the outlines and the blueprints. And he felt like he was the only one that was speaking out in regards to his colleagues about why this would be problematic and how people are actually losing the skills to be an architect that they went to school for. And he basically was voicing that AI is a line in the sand. And I made the point that I agreed with everything that he said. I conceded everything he said. But at the same time, I highlighted, from my own experience as a person creating content online, I can use Opus Clips, which is an AI service you pay for that can cut little reels and shorts that I post here on YouTube and Instagram. They can help consolidate information to give me a better outline in places where I should go to research for a specific topic. But at the same point, I conceded that all technology, even from Socrates criticizing writing, that it's interesting that we kind of lose dimensions of ourselves in the technology. And I think that's what's so scary about the AI is people losing their critical thinking skills, losing their ability to write, losing their ability to express themselves, and becoming more and more and more dependent on the AI. So I bring all that up to ask you guys, where are you at with AI? And is AI a line in the sand, something you refuse to use or something that you use very cautiously? I would consider myself probably in that category. But what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I'm definitely a use cautiously guy, especially with a lot of the AI that's out there right now. I mean, anything that's offered by tech, if it's free, you are the product.
Right.
And so your input is part of what they sell. So that's also a concern at work and whatnot, of course, because of course everyone wants to get in on the AI boom, but safety and security is not always the top priority.
Yeah.
So I'm more so about the loss of drawing among architects. The thing to take into account is, one, most Western architecture is absolute trash, and most architects are worth nothing.
Also
and
agreed.
With them going broke.
This person is Orthodox, and it sides with everything that we're talking about here. That's why his frustration with his own industry feels like it's going to move deeper into the wrong direction.
Correct. So the thing to take into account is, so like I heard the same thing about the same thing was said about AutoCAD in engineering, that engineering technical drawing would go away, and it hasn't. But what essentially happens is the people who are trash at it go away, and the mediocre go away. Like an example where AI is changing things. So I know Amazon has already essentially destroyed and cannibalized the ebook market. And they're about to do the same thing with mass print. They've been buying up and building publishing houses so they can print on demand and effectively destroy the remaining big publishers, which I'm totally down with. But essentially, it means the real money isn't going to be in, like, what this means is, so with how Amazon does their AI algorithm for pushing books, you're going to see people using AI to generate books, which Amazon will then push on its platform with its AI algorithm. So essentially, real books end up becoming what you end up seeing is real books end up becoming a niche. So the thing is, like, what is profitable is like to do leather bound books like this.
Mm-hmm.
With like archival paper, 22 karat gold, Smithsonian, all that fun jazz. The thing is, what you're already seeing in reading is reading, or like for people who like genuinely love books, it's becoming more of a niche specialist product, and it's no longer like about like if you use an author, like the goal is no longer a paperback. The more the goal is to typically what you see with authors who make it is they build a successful blog to build a following. They have a core fan base that sends them money. They make books. That's how they get their core book sales from. And down the line, if you get one of these, that also will generate, if you can hit that higher quality of stuff to deliver to people, people will pay for that. Just as an example, so like Andrei Martyanov, who wrote three books on like the decline of the West and Western military in particular. We're actually going to be doing one of his books, leatherbound, for example.
Oh,
But this is an example of like in the face of AI, like the fact is quality is going to stand out even more, and even with drawing. So two other places where AI is going to change things. So the way that like Pro Tools and a bunch of other stuff, like home recording suddenly became viable for blue collar musicians. The same thing is about to happen with the movie industry. What AI is doing is it's going to drastically cut the cost for CGI, essentially like the type of movies they make that cost like 150 million, someone's going to be able to make in their well, not necessarily the garage, but it'll cut the real price down to like 5 million. And that's something that's doable for small movie makers. So what you're going to see is more and more Hollywood alternatives coming out in the movie space and in the West. The same way that you see like a lot of musicians I listen to, they're not in any labels. They're just direct support and they record stuff on their own. That's what's going to happen in the movie industry. That's already happening in the comics industry. And essentially, like looking at the comics industry, it's not like there'll no longer be any people drawing comics, because I've supported some stuff in there. And what you end up happening is the few people who are good and can consistently put out good work, those people will make money. Like they will make bank as the few remaining humans. Those who phoned it in are unreliable. They're the ones who get washed out and replaced by AI.
right.
And so I've seen that in the comic industry. I'm starting to see that happening in the movie industry, and it's going to take off there for sure. And even in the book industry, it's like what do you call it? Like you're not going to be making money, selling a mass market paperback. But if you build a core following and you get people who will spend for your novel or whatever book you're writing, that's where the money will be in the future.
Yeah,
So,
this was. I want to continue there because that was kind of my point when we talked about this in the think tank meeting was looking at AI more holistically and what type of economy is going to be present in the future, and it's going to be skill based, because anything that isn't skill based, the AI can do. Anything that's repetitive, and so there's always, my point was that there's always going to be a market for human art. There's always going to be a market for a skill as a musician. There's always going to be a market for a man that can weld, a construction worker, content creation, even what I do. Sure, if your goal was to just choose a topic that I might do a stream on and find as much information, you could use Chat GPT-4 or some type of AI, and it's going to be more, already that exists is way more advanced than Chat GPT-4. But the point is human interaction, human quality. What my business is basically filtering information and then presenting it. And that is a skill that a machine can't do. So so it's like you think about the economy of the future, it's really going to be more and more skill based, because the people behind it, especially those in favor of depopulation, basically just want to create a caste system, a slave class of those that are replaceable and have no real skills. And then you'll have a minority that have genuine skills. And just like my architect friend, I was like, the fact that you can draw and you can do this stuff, never lose that, because your coworkers are going to lose it. As he said, they already are. It's like the future is going to reward people with genuine human skills.
And you can even see it. I mean, just look at furniture. You figure furniture will be completely, or furniture making will be completely, there'll be no money for the guy who just makes stuff that's beautiful, and everything would just be industrial. But, I know plenty of local Mennonites and a few Amish who, they make stuff by hand. They treat the wood the old fashioned way, and they charge, granted a bookshelf will cost you $1,200, but, people will pay for it. There's always going to be a market for skill, for beauty. And that's something that AI on its own is not going to be able to do, nor is it something that is going to be pushed by the big guys like Amazon. Because the fact is, Amazon, like you take their book market, you take the music market or movies or what have you, they're always looking for the lowest common denominator to hit the most amount of mass, the highest percentage of the masses that they can.
Right.
And the fact is, like, so why compete for that? Just build a niche, build something that's high quality that you can build a demand for around that.
Right.
You can build a core fan base or a core a consumer base, but people who value beauty in whatever it is that you do. That's essentially the future is for people who are not what do you call it, government favored corporations. And
Well, yeah, and as beauty becomes more rare, it'll become higher in demand. I mean,
Amen.
I know I'm not going to pay top dollar for a giant AI art poster. I mean,
right.
The value, like you said, is in the handmade. It's in the things where you can even possibly meet the person locally that makes your stuff. You can go to them as your person to get those things, whether it's bookbinding, furniture, leatherworking, anything like that.
Right. Yeah, and in regards to what Jose was saying with the niche thing, is that's also something that we're already seeing in regards to online businesses. Unless you're like Mr. Beast and you just study the algorithm to get the most views, the goal is to really just find your niche and build a niche audience, and that's how you create an online business nowadays. Is these coaches that want to tell you how to build your business, what they just tell you is just to find your niche and then build content around your niche. So
yep.
I mean, that's a benefit of the internet and allows us to build. I mean, this little YouTube channel is exactly that. Jim Bob, Andrew, Dyer. These are niche things that we're able to build audiences and businesses with. But yeah, I think that's the future, is focusing on like who's your community and what skill set do you offer back to that community. And then it can be, maybe you're a homemaker, that content creation. I know I have a friend, his wife she on her Instagram, she makes like content for, wives living traditional lifestyles, cooking recipes, this type of stuff. She went from just a few thousand on Instagram. She's over like 500,000 in less than a year and is making six figures through an ebook. And that's just because she creates quality content with good information. And so I haven't had that success. I'm very jealous, but the fact that I know them and saw that whole process take off, it's like, it's certainly possible.
Well, we just need the DPH ebook now, man.
Yeah, I do need a DPH ebook.
Just make an audio version as well,
Yeah, exactly. I need something like that.
That was the other thing too.
But
that's
the niche
automated.
Thing, go ahead.
AI audio book, the voice acting. Like a lot of voice actors are getting losing their jobs, but it's the same people who are the lower quality, the mediocre. You have to be really, really good to not get replaced by AI in voice acting.
Well, and the thing with all these positions that are getting replaced, and like you said, it leaves behind only the skilled. I mean, and the people who come to rely on these AI tools, like, someone who doesn't put time and effort into their craft and has to have the AI basically backing them up, no matter what industry you're in or what your skill set is, those tools can be taken away. So the more you dive into becoming skilled at using the AI versus being able to actually do things, the more limited you become. And the second that tool is removed, this happens actually pretty often, and I won't nerd out too hard, but in cybersecurity challenges where there's like, hackathons and whatnot, people who rely on tools like Metasploit to automate their attacks and automate their scripts and automate their malware and everything, the second that the patch level is just one step too high for everything to be deployed with a tool, they're just stumped. They're just stuck because they can't do it by hand. They don't know how the technology actually works or the exploits work. And I imagine it's going to be the same with other avenues like art, other avenues like music. Once those tools get, a couple lawsuits, like what's going on with ChatGPT for copyright infringement because of reproduction. Once those tools get put on pause or put on hold, all of a sudden the people who have focused all their skills into just using the AI tool, then that will leave just the skilled people left.
Right. Yeah, and young people, they just don't think about skill set. I always talk about skills. If you're a man, that's the whole point, is to develop. Because we were sold this, false promise. You go to university and then you get a job. Nowhere in there were they talking about developing specific skills that other people don't have that contribute. And so I know so many people with a master's degree that have to work a regular job, maybe at a retail store or doing something because they can't get an industry job because they don't have the experience, and therefore they're not going to hire them. And it's like, well, that was the whole lie. It was to create an indentured servitude through these student loans and never provide you a skill to actually get out from underneath it.
Yeah, or the master's programs now. I don't know. I recently got through grad school. Like, I don't know. I have to believe that grad school was higher value a decade ago, even.
Yeah.
Some of the classes that I took, I was like, this is like intro stuff. Like, I'm relearning what I learned in undergrad. Like, I thought I was going to be challenged. I thought this was going to be hard.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. Graduate school is not at the level of academic scrutiny that it used to be. That's for sure. Especially, I love history. So it's like I read about these people in history, or even generals that were writing books and knew all of the philosophy up to their point and were strategic on the battlefield. And they have all these skills and they were so highly educated. And they were like 25, 27 years old. They had all this knowledge and world experience. And you're like, the average person is playing Fortnite. Like, we're just so divorced from actual skill sets. And it's like, we are legitimately dumber. We legitimately have less skills than our parents and our grandparents and their parents. And that's where it's like there's a spiritual happening with the technology where we're literally giving over our creativity and our ability to become higher versions of ourselves to the machine.
Yeah, I actually really identify with that. In my early 20s, I mean, it's embarrassing, but yeah, like, you check your total time played in League of Legends, and then you think like, man, 1,000 hours of my life has gone into this worthless thing. Like, what if I would have concentrated 1,000 hours? How much better at guitar could I be? How much better at this other skill could I be? How much better at literally anything that would be worthwhile could I be if I just gave this up?
It's also an issue of playing the wrong games. If you're playing League of Legends instead of like Hearts of Iron, I thought it was a joke at the time, but in 2019, there was a thing put out by the Kremlin that they were looking to hire like top level Hearts of Iron players, and then I thought that was a joke. And then during the special military operation, there was a photo of a guy that I've played Hearts of Iron with multiplayer, and he was dressed up. He was with Wagner. He was hired and he was doing wargaming for them. So it's like,
explain to that. Explain. I don't catch the connection between the video game and the military application.
So Hearts of Iron 4 is a war game. It's a more realistic war game. Like
strategic or like first person shooter, or
not a first person shooter. This is like some of the most, like, Hearts of Iron and Victoria are like the two most complicated war games that exist, like in terms of video games.
Okay.
So they're usually referred to also as historical simulators, but in the case of Hearts of Iron in particular, it's the most realistic like war game for video game, because the focus is primarily on industrial production, economic optimization to support a military machine.
Okay.
So it's a level of complexity that most video games don't have, and most people playing video games don't play. So, but yeah, so just some of the top guys from that apparently were hired by the Kremlin, which I find.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Welcome, Thomas. What's going on, my man?
Thanks, guys. I'm doing good. How about y'all?
Good. You have anything specific on the topic right now? We were talking a lot about AI. I don't know if you were following the combo, but if you have anything on that or on the general topic, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt your guys' discussion, but I did want to just throw out there, like, my line in the sand is kind of more political in nature, to
Okay.
my understanding. Like, recently we've seen with like the EU this move towards like a super state, and more broadly in the international arena, just like sort of, and even with international organizations or sometimes even corporate structures, but you see like a subversion or a subjugation of like national sovereignty. And just from my reading and interpretation of scripture, that's what I think, that's what I'm looking out for.
Okay, so question coming back, because I don't disagree with you. How do you stop that in you as a person, or how do you say no to that?
Well, to be quite honest with you, I don't know if I'm able to. I think I'm just along for the ride at this point anyways,
Right.
which is, it's not useful at all to say, but that's just my
Yeah. Well, I
intuition.
agree with you with the political nature. That's why I kind of limit him to things like you can make your personal choice in regards to like an RFID chip or a mask or something like that. Because I agree with you. We're not going to stop the political engine that is moving towards its ultimate conclusion that it desires, whether it's going to get it or not. But I'm with you, because that's one of the reasons why, and I want to be careful on this topic because I know YouTube flags it, but like mass migration, obviously not in favor of that. That's again, I'll be doing a stream Thursday, God willing, able to finish the research on the Roman Empire and its period of mass migration and how it brought it to its knees and basically ended the Western Roman Empire. But we can see that agenda is at hand right now all across the Western world. But I don't think I'm going to be able to stop it. And I don't see it stopping at all until, even if we did, quote unquote, get a new president, and even if we did get a Donald Trump, I'm still very skeptical on him actually being able to stop it. But you see, like, even let's just theoretically say he did on his first week in office, it's an open border for another year. We just had, I forget how many thousands of Chinese nationalists just came in the last week.
I definitely don't think it's something we're going to vote our way out of.
Exactly. That's my point in regards to where's your line in the sand, because eventually the only thing that's going to come down to is personal choice. And so each of us is going to have to say no to something. And it's like, where do we say no? Because the digital IDs, for example, I have a friend in Greece and he's already said no. And they have to get the digital ID for economic participation, healthcare, and all state services. And so that's a real thing that's happening in Greece. Now, me being married, God willing, have children, am I going to use a Fed Reserve CBDC? I may have to. Is that sin, or is it detrimental to my salvation? This is an open question. Maybe other people have different opinions. I would say it's not detrimental to your salvation yet. And it's like, well, where is the line in the sand? I would say anything that goes under your skin, anything that goes into your body. But I respect, because I know people in our group that have already said no to the digital IDs here in the United States. So they're not getting one. And just some inside baseball based on people I know, the banks are going to force digital IDs in 2025 in the United States. So the Greece are going to have them by 25. They're going to be rolled out in 2025 in the U.S. I know people that are in the banking system that's already been issued by the Fed Reserve, already told them. So that's coming. None of us here are going to be able to stop it. Do we say no to that, and do we start building our lives in opposition to it, which is going to make you more anti-fragile as time goes on? But there's a lot of us that aren't going to be able to say no because we have other people that depend on us to take care of. And that's where I don't think it affects your salvation. If you have a family depending on you and you get a digital ID and you're using CBDCs, I mean, God clearly knows the context of your life and what you're trying to do. But what are you guys' thoughts on that?
I mean, I work for the state that I live in. And so I'm blessed to be in a position where I actually get input into stopping some of that stuff from entering my state. But then I see, because, I'm in contact with a lot of other state governments that, for example, Utah is, I don't know if you guys have looked into that or heard anything about what's going on with Utah state government, but
In what regards? I'm not familiar. In what regards?
Oh, they're like full on looking to be the first United States smart state. And
Oh, I didn't know
they
that.
are rolling out the Utah Smart ID. You can link all of your professional credentials to it. They monitor and start tying stuff into, you get special discounts or some kind of tie into where they're tracking your grocery purchases. Like they're going full on for the UN agenda and trying to match that one for one.
I just want to
The
make
special agenda.
one point. I want you to continue on, but that makes sense with Utah because, you know, the Mormons are the first group outside the transhumanists to have a pro-transhumanist association. So
Yeah.
So Mormonism is totally on board with like a transhumanist globalist future.
Yeah, and I've known people.
They also are the most outspoken and prepared for the collapse. But I just wanted to throw that in there. Why it kind of makes sense then why actually Utah would be doing that.
Well, yeah, and I know some people that moved there because, you know, the Mormons believe they're not Mormon, but they moved there specifically because the Mormons kind of control the state in a way. Right. And the Mormons believe in their dogma that the Constitution of the United States is part of the Word of God.
Right.
Like it was the inspired Word of God, so they're not down to change it. But at the same time, and all this, they say one thing, but then in the background, it seems like all these deals are being made to, you know, do wild stuff. Like the state of Utah has opened up its doors to where if you live in a country where maybe your lifestyle is not smiled upon for marriage, you can get married in the state of Utah, but be in another country.
Interesting.
Like an online marriage for Skittles type marriages in countries that don't allow it. Like there's all sorts of crazy stuff happening there. And like I said, with the position I'm in, I've seen decisions come down to the wire where an unelected group of just government employees who don't answer to any voter constituents who were not voted into position have the power to make these massive decisions that if people voted on it, they would clearly be against. And so, yeah, it's been bizarre. I would encourage everyone who lives in the United States to look into your state government and what they're about and what they're doing from a tech perspective.
Right. Well, just side note, Blue Skittle just threw in $5 over on the Dono chat. No comment. Thank you so much, Blue Skittle. And guys, if you have any comments or questions or you want to support the stream, feel free to do so with a super chat over on Dono chat, Streamlabs, or YouTube, whichever one you prefer. Yeah. So the Mormons, it's very interesting. I was actually wanting to do a stream on Mormonism and transhumanism because it's actually part of their theology in regards to, again, people know that they're going to get their own planets and all this different stuff. So it's interesting how Utah and the Mormons, although they are one of the best groups in the United States in regards to buying enough rations of food and all this different stuff for potential, you know, going out of the grid, they're also the ones that are most in favor religiously outside of transhumanists who say that it's not religious, but it kind of is, for this globalist agenda. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize how much the Mormons were down for that. Every state's got at least a couple of them, but they're definitely focused a lot in the Northwest.
Yeah. Yeah. Elon says Mormons are a big ground for glowies to infiltrate. That's true too. I know. It's funny how, well, I did a stream talking about the gentleman that was rescuing children from the sex trade. I forget what his name is. But there is, just looking into that, I found that there was one source that said that a lot of Mormons are in the U.S. intelligence agencies.
Mm-hmm. Really?
Yeah. That they actually, it's a significant number.
They're one of the most powerful blocks in U.S. intelligence. So that's why I consider Mormonism to be like the truly American religion.
Esoteric, Masonic, hodgepodge of Christian ideals.
I never thought of it, but really does check every single box. I think you're right.
Yeah. And the field of new religious movements begins with Mormonism. So all religions that have came after Mormonism are considered a new religious movement, academically speaking. But
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So
I was just going to say the good news is about digital IDs for our currency system and everything is that the Federal Reserve and the entire banking system, one, because I work in financial tech, it's the least secure stuff known to man because you can't air gap anything because people need access to their money. And then two, they're going to have everything on the cloud. And three, they want to start World War III where there will be EMPs. So I don't see the system lasting long. Like something's got to break at some point, or they decide to not do World War III, which is not a bad thing.
Let's hope.
Yeah,
but our leaders are so incompetent. I don't. Did you guys check out the Tucker Putin interview?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
What do you guys think about that?
Honestly, I was kind of disappointed.
In what way?
I expected Tucker to ask him a lot more questions around specific types of labs that were out there.
Exactly. That was one that I mentioned in my review. He never mentioned the labs.
Oh yeah, I saw that. And oh man, I'm trying to remember. There were a couple other things that I wanted to mention, but it seemed like Tucker was it seemed like he was trying to give Putin a little bit of a hard time. Not that I'm like a super simp for Putin or anything, but it seemed like he was concerned about coming off as too friendly. Yeah. And he just kind of stuck on some points that I don't think anyone really cared about, and then just kind of blew past others and left a lot of questions I thought he was going to ask just completely out of it. For a 2-hour interview, I thought they were going to really cover some ground.
I agree. And I thought the history lesson, people were like rolling their eyes about the history lesson for the first 30. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Because it lays out the context of Poland, Ukraine, the Polish Lithuanian, kingdom there that existed, the historic lands of the Russian people. Other people thought it was kind of boring. I thought that was actually one of the better parts. And one of the positive takeaways I thought was how intricately related Orthodoxy is. Putin was explicit to the Russian identity, and that's what holds them together. Even though they have, a multipolar religious landscape in Russia, it's Orthodoxy. And everybody, even if they're of a different faith, understands that is what Russia represents. Mm-hmm. I thought that was great. But I agree with you on Tucker, especially the second half. It's like he kept wanting Putin to apologize for it.
Yeah.
And the whole point is he was saying that I was pushed to this point because they crossed my red line. I thought that was a sort of weird dynamic.
But can't you just say sorry?
Yeah.
The thing with that interview is the target audience wasn't the American people. It was specifically in the Beltway. It was Putin offering like, hey, this is like we can help you do an off-ramp if you guys want to take an off-ramp. Like that's the pure gist of it that he was trying to communicate. And even like where he says like there was a point where Tucker was asking whatever, like so who makes the decisions when Putin referred to twice that U.S. presidents can make decisions and then get overridden by the bureaucracy.
That was interesting.
And Putin told Tucker, look at Tucker right in the eye and just said to him, we don't know who makes those decisions. Like in reality is they do know who makes those decisions. They're just communicating to the people who make those real decisions. Like, hey, do you guys want to like try to save face? And the other aspect too is what do you call it? At least for the American ruling class who are more well-read, Putin with his argument of history there, he's pointing out that Russian identity, like the ethnic identity of the Rus, is far, far deeper, frankly, than even English identity.
Right.
And that's the gist of it. And just anyone who spent time with Russians, with Russian-speaking Ukrainians, Belarusians, etc., like they would know this. Like even the reason why Belarus was separated from Russia was because Belarus was brought under the Catholic Church when they were ruled by the Commonwealth of Poland, Lithuania. You had unitism there, but then which resulted in kind of like a drift between Russians who were Orthodox and the Belarusians. But then the Belarusians returned back to the faith en masse, and now you see the union state that they're forming, where Belarus is being like actively reintegrated back into Russia,
right?
And it's going to be fully integrated. And the reason that's happening is because they again have a common faith, and that's the gist of it. There's no need per se for a state ideology the way that the American state needs, because the Russian people do have a core common faith. And even in terms of like people talk about, Russia's multipolar religious structure, the thing you have to take into account, I know like there's no way he was going to cover it in the interview just because one, I was amazed at how he managed to condense everything in 30 minutes because I would not have been able to do that. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought it was a great overview. I know
Well-
that, and Tucker kind of, but why did you invade? He's like, I'm leading into that. I'm trying to lay out
Yep.
like how this all unfolded.
Yep. And anyone who be familiar with Russians would know that they like to tell things in story format, which is or old world. It's old world. It's not new world. Americans care about the decision, not the story of how you got there. It's very ironically, this is why I say, like, if you want to understand the American legal system, you have to read Maimonides, because that was his view on Jewish law. Not the story, not the arguments that got to that solution. And if you go to the Supreme Court building, the chief icon they have there is of Maimonides. Because his approach to law is very much his philosophical approach to law is very much the American philosophical approach to law, which is part of why the U.S. is so screwed up. But like in terms of like going back to the religion, so like for example, you look at the Tartars, and the Tartars were de facto conquered by the Rus. The reason why the Rus conquered them was because the Tartars kept raiding them to do slave raids. And the Tsars were like trying to set up peace, etc. And the Tartars were essentially not honoring anything. And then you have Ivan IV or Ivan the Terrible, who just runs them over completely. Realizes, okay, now I have all their territory. Settles a bunch of Orthodox peasants throughout the countryside because the Tartars were steppe nomads. And then essentially they set up a deal where the church can freely do mission work. The Tartars weren't forced to convert. It wasn't like the West. You can't really force people to convert at the sword to become Orthodox, because Orthodoxy is a way of life.
Right.
But the fact is, over a couple centuries, like 3 centuries, a third of the Tartar population became Orthodox. And now, 4.5 centuries later after that, the dialects of Tartar are no longer between the Christians and the ones who are still Muslim have completely diverged, and they're no longer mutually intelligible. So it's just fascinating things like that, or like the Chuvash. The Chuvash were like example of a tribe that were shamanist, and they were permitted to keep the faith of their forefathers as long as they allowed the church to set up missions there. And then at one point in the early 19th century, they all, like the chieftain, decided to convert to Orthodoxy after being part of Russia for a century and a half, and then the whole Chuvash converted. So There's a lot of cases like that. So it's very different than the Spanish model in terms of how you handle pagans in your territory. The fact is, the Russian, like, I'm not talking even about today how it is. Like, I know Putin is actively trying to restore it, but like just going back to the Tsarist model, which is more explicitly Orthodox than Putin,
Right.
obviously. The Russians had a system where essentially, like, you could keep the faith of your fathers, if you so desire, if you're going to be part of the Russian state project. But the door has to always be open that your people, or whoever can choose to become Christian. And that was very effective. That was very effective within what is now the Russian state. And granted, some people were more stubborn. Like, for example, I'm thinking of Kadyrov, Chechens. But the first baptism of Chechens has happened in the past like 4 years. So it's one step at a time. The view of mission work in their field is more for. That's the thing I think interesting about Orthodox mission work. It's very much has the long term in view, or the long term goal of the long term conversion of a people. It's not looking for immediate conversion right now. Although if that happens, great.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I'm pretty ignorant of Russian history. I just started my trip down the Rokor rabbit hole, so I'm still a complete noob when it comes to all the Eastern European history that ties into Orthodoxy. But I thought that it was all super interesting. And Jose, is there any books you'd recommend on this subject, or channels, or places to go to learn more about it? You seem to have a wealth of knowledge on it.
I read a lot of Orthodox history. I mean, in terms of like individual books, I know there's a book called, dang it, somewhere over there. There's actually a book that some Russian friends gave me that I don't remember the title of, but I have it somewhere on one of these bookshelves. I don't think it's on this bookshelf. I think it's the one in the other room. But I think it's called, Russians by the Russians or something like that. I'll find it.
MyTech23 throws in $5. Thank you so much, MyTech23. And he says the Clinton administration probably thought Putin was a great replacement for Yeltsin just because of his name put in. Little did they know. Well, I don't know if they're playing those same word games, but certainly it was interesting that Putin made the point that Bill Clinton himself told him that they would not be accepted into NATO when the whole principal basis of NATO was to protect Europe from Russia. Therefore, if Russia joined, essentially that would put it into NATO. There'd no longer be a need for it. And so they basically just showed that the plan of NATO was never to protect, but it was to destroy Russia and to undermine it and to take it over. And so, again, Tucker could have done a better job at making that explicit and clarifying. Again, I wasn't extremely pleased with the way that he conducted the interview. And I know people, even in the comments here, they are very skeptical of Putin, and rightfully so. We don't know his heart. But he was very explicit about Orthodoxy being the sort of cohesive glue to the Russian people, or like that. And he called out, much of the Western hypocrisy. But Tucker, again, it felt like he wanted to get Putin to say, "I'm sorry," or "I was in the wrong." And it's like, well, yeah, I felt like you came with these pre-scripted questions that aren't really fitting with everything he's trying to explain. Because you watch other Tucker stuff, like the speeches he gave in Canada, and he's totally calling out the demonic, satanic elite of our countries.
Yeah.
And then he interviews Putin, and I don't know, it just felt like it was a bit a different vibe for sure. But the fact that NATO would never let Russia in highlights that NATO's existence was never about protection of Europe. It's about an undermining of Russia.
Or maybe that's just a line that they won't cross.
Yeah.
Yep. I was going to say, this is a book, if you want a book to start with, it's Russia and the Russians, just as a good intro. If you're looking for just an intro to Russian history, it is written by a Westerner who's a professor over at some university in London. But he wrote the book, this historical book, intentionally because, one, there really isn't that much on Russian history in English. And two, the immense, he was someone who actually has read a lot of primary sources in Russian and Slavonic as well. What's the word I'm looking for? So yeah, so he found it disconcerting how much sheer ignorance there was of Russia in the West, and how many people, well-educated people he knew, considered Russia to be a non-element. And this is like back in like 2000, that Russia didn't matter. And so he actually wrote it as for a purpose of what do you call it? Fighting Western ignorance, for the purposes that the West could take Russia seriously and not get themselves dashed on the rocks yet again. Like they did under Mean Mr. Mustache Man or Napoleon,
Right.
in the past. So, and apparently right now. So,
well, I just pulled that up on Amazon. I'm going to add that to my shopping cart.
Yeah, I'm gonna get that too, so that I know more about Russians, and they're the bad guys in every '80s movie.
Yeah, exactly. Shout out to Kristen. She is a COTEL crew member for 11 months. Thank you so much, Kristen, for all your support. She said, "Pat, please consider using the raid feature in your setting to send this chat over to Jamie Hanshaw's stream when you finish up tonight." Okay. Yeah, no problem.
I'm gonna head out, by the way, guys.
got it.
Oh, you out of here? All right. God bless, brother. Thanks for hopping on, man.
Yeah, anytime.
All right.
See you
Appreciate
guys.
you. Take it easy. God bless.
I was going to say one more thing too, in terms of because my main primary source in Russian history is ironically the hagiographies.
Oh, really?
Saints. You get so much info on that. You learn so much about Ivan the Terrible and all these other characters. Peter the Great, or the so-called Great.
What is your favorite book on Russian Orthodoxy? Do you have one that stands out?
I don't. That I don't have. I mean, I've just been going through the Great Synax Orestes, and you have plenty of Russian saints in there. That's what I've been primarily been doing. Is just, what do you call it? Like, I actually think it's probably one of the best ways to learn about a country is to learn to study their saints. And that's part of why I want my kids to learn Russian, because I want them to be able to read Saint Theophan the Recluse, etc., without having to wait on people doing translations of stuff.
Right. Well, and one of the things I just finished a documentary on was the Great Northern War between Sweden and Peter the Great, and again the Polish-Lithuanian kingdom there, and that whole thing. The Danes. that was a little piece of history that I wasn't totally familiar with. And it's like how did Russia actually acquire some of those northern lands next to Finland? So there's just so much. That's what I love learning history. And I love watching mostly military and like battle history between the different kingdoms
So
and
do we
empires.
all.
Yep.
Yeah.
You've heard Sabaton's album on the Great Northern War?
No, what's that? I don't even know who
Let me send you the name
Sabaton
of it.
is.
There's a whole album on. You don't know Sabaton?
No.
It sounds vaguely familiar, actually. I don't know why.
They're a metal band. They do metal. They do history. There's actually a lot of people.
Oh,
I
a
know
Swedish power metal band. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the Line of the North. I think that's the song. Which is the name
Line
of
of
the
the
album? They have a
North?
whole album on the Great Northern War.
Or the
and
Last
I really
Stand?
love a lot of the songs there, especially Poltava.
The Great War.
Yeah, Carolus Rex. That's it. Carolus Rex. Should be Carolus Rex. And they have it in English and in Swedish. So obviously, listen to it in English if you want to learn stuff.
Okay. I just got it pulled up on YouTube. Sabaton Careless Rex. I'll share the link if anybody wants to watch it later in the chat. I'll check it out. But yeah, that there's so much forgotten history. That's why I think it's so important for people to learn more and more history, because you can't understand geopolitics, and you definitely can't understand where we're moving towards, because the old world is reemerging in power and the new world is getting ready to fall off. And people don't necessarily look at it that way. But even when Putin used the metaphor of the right and left hemispheres of the brain, I thought that was a pretty apropos analogy, because he talked about how when the hemispheres aren't in connection, we call that insanity. And it's like, you look at what's going on, it's definitely insane for sure.
Yeah. And it's an example of like,
it kind of upends a lot of the narrative around Western kind of academics who may be on our side more so. They've been talking about the multipolar world. You go on any of those Twitter spaces, they're all talking about the multipolar world. But Putin, one of the leaders of the so-called multipolar world, one of the like driving forces of it, besides like China and things like that, he clearly doesn't see it that way. And so I think that a lot of these analysts are getting it wrong, because I think what he understands it as is that the body is a series of units working as a whole. But the units aren't like removed from the whole, but they also aren't the same as the whole. So I think that that's something he sees. And that's what I got away from that interview as well. But speaking on the Russian Orthodoxy, because I heard you guys talking about it right before I jumped on, the one person you should read, and to find it is very difficult. There's like this really sketchy Russian bookstore online that you can get it from. But the Diaries of St. Nicholas of Japan. If you want to get a really keen understanding of the height of the Russian Empire and how they viewed mission work, that is the guy to go to. Read his book on that. It's absolutely mind-boggling how he systematically approached evangelism of the Japanese people. Absolutely mind-boggling. His insights are amazing. So I highly recommend it. I'll try and find it and then send it to you guys later.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jose. Oh, I was going to say Blue Skittle renewed his membership. He's been a COTEL crew member for 3 months. Thank you so much, Blue Skittle. And he says, Defense of Moscow, their best song. He must be talking about Sabaton to Jose.
Yep. Not sure if it's my favorite, but it's up there.
And then shout out to Petrogarde for coming on. He threw in a $5 super chat and said Sabaton is awesome. So sound like I'm on the outs there. I wasn't familiar. But so getting back onto the subject today, and Nicholas, welcome, brother, and feel free to add anything. We were talking about where exactly the line in the sand is for us, and I think we've all agreed basically anything that goes under the skin is a line in the sand. But Jose didn't actually explicitly state which line in the sand outside of that is there. And I'm curious if there is one, because, and Nicholas, feel free to speak to this if you have differing opinions. But my point was that digital ID, CBDCs, digital health passports, although leading towards total domination, aren't sins in of themselves if people have to get those for their jobs, to make money, to take care of their families. And that many of us in this chat, even though we're aware of what's happening, may in fact be participants in all that stuff. So for some people I know too in the Orthodox world, that is a line in the sand and they're not doing it. And so I'm curious, Jose and Nicholas, like outside of RFID chips, experimental medicines, where is another line in the sand for you guys?
Well,
That's the thing. Because I
for
know in my
me,
case, like
I'm an online guy, so almost all my work is done via that. And I'm no stranger to digital IDs because of the nature of my work in the past as well. I don't have a problem with them per se. My biggest problem is that I think a line in the sand is if they attempt to make everything reliant on a digital ID. I'm very skeptical of moving away, and this shocks some people who are more maybe libertarian bent or maybe more skeptical of the Fed, which I am skeptical of the Fed, but I'm actually not a fan of
Rightfully
moving away.
so.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of a lot of these nations moving away from fiat currency, or in the sense of like physical currency, I guess is what you say, like minting actual money. I actually think that that's a really bad thing. I think that having cash in your hand is a lot different, and it actually changes the way in which we approach money. And so for me, this digital ID stuff is really dangerous in that it makes people feel like money is just this kind of ethereal force, which it kind of is now, let's be honest, because of the way they print it. But I think that change has really been bad for people. And so I do everything I can to keep on using cash when possible, just because I think that it's important that we at least kind of put a line in the sand. I mean, we just have to look at history and look at devaluing what a currency is not a good idea. And so this is also why I'm slightly skeptical, and this is due to my tech background, because I'm in tech. I'm in IT specifically. I'm skeptical of crypto. And I know that's controversial for some as well, for various reasons. So I don't know. I feel like all of that is leading towards a sort of like, not maybe a mark, you know what I mean? But kind of like it's laying that foundational groundwork, and I don't trust it. So.
Well, I don't trust crypto. I have crypto, and I love that Bitcoin got to 50,000, but I think that they're going to block off the exchanges.
Yeah.
So my worry about crypto is not about Bitcoin as a process to store value and the blockchain. My point is, say you have $2 million in crypto and they've blocked all the exchanges. And so the only way you can use it is if somebody else is willing to take the crypto. And so that's what I think is going to happen in the next few years. Is now at the same point, there's movements where you see Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan. Now they'll say, oh, Bitcoin's terrible. It drops. And then all of a sudden you hear these large financial organizations then buy up a bunch of Bitcoin and they're like, oh, Bitcoin's great. And then it goes back up again.
Yeah.
So I could see them getting into it to regulate it. And maybe that would extend its usability. But I'm skeptical on how exactly you're going to be able to get the crypto into a global market.
Crypto has a Achilles heel, which a lot of people don't talk about, is that the normie people, which are the people that would have to adopt it ultimately to actually upend any sort of current system we have, they view it in the lens of its relation to fiat currency. So someone doesn't look at Bitcoin and say, oh, that's worth 1 Bitcoin. They look at it and say, well, 1 Bitcoin is worth XYZ amount of fiat currency. And so that mentality is going to be its Achilles heel, in my opinion, because for mass adoption to take place, you have to have a shift in thinking. And people aren't going to do that, frankly. And also, eventually, it's going to be impractical. It's like, I have 0.000000001 Bitcoin because because it's there's a limited supply of it, and so at some point it's going to get to such ridiculous numbers, no one's going to want to even bother with it. So, in my opinion, governments are going to get involved anyways. I think that it's doomed. It's doomed because there's no way governments are going to allow it to go completely unregulated. They already are starting to regulate.
And I just want to say, if anybody out there wants to support COTEL with Bitcoin, I accept Bitcoin. So,
and this is not a smash against Bitcoin or crypto, broadly speaking. I think that it does have utility. I just think
I'm
that
still in the
people
market.
are putting too many eggs in a basket, you know?
Exactly. I'm still in the market, hoping that something else changes. But Jose, what's your thoughts? Looks like you had some thoughts on that topic.
Yeah, well, it's the nature of currency, the nature of money. Like people debate on what money is, but the fact is, and I know like most people think in the United States, at least they think money primarily in terms of means of exchange, but that's because the Anglo-Saxon is naturally a nation of shopkeepers and bookkeepers. But you look in the history of money, like when it comes around, you know, whether you go to Pharaoh's Egypt or ancient Sumeria or ancient China, currency was always developed first for the purposes of tax collection. So why is it that people needed? Why did they need money? Because they needed to meet their tax debts. And the thing is, today, you know, what do you pay your taxes in? Do you pay it in Bitcoin or do you pay it in dollars? And the same thing with debt obligations. Are they in Bitcoin or are they in dollars? Can you take your gold and pay off your mortgage with it directly? That's the thing about currency. So what creates demand for currency is you have to use it to pay. You know, is essentially tax. You have to pay a certain tax, as well as whatever debt obligations you have that are written out in that currency. That's why Argentina has been had such a terrible time for the last century, because over the past century, you know, their debt has continually been written out in dollars, which means that Argentina has to get dollars to meet their internal, not just external debt obligations, but internal debt obligations for corporations, private businesses, etc. So what you end up having is everyone is rushing out of, I think it's the lira, and into the dollar, and that of course touches the currency, and everything goes to crap. That's why Russia did not go to crap when they were cut off from SWIFT, because Russia internally did not have debt denominated in dollars. Putin paid off all the dollar denominated debt, and internally did a lot of stuff to encourage companies to not have dollar denominated debt. And that was helped by the sanctions that were implemented post Crimea. So if you don't have dollar denominated debt, in this case, if a state doesn't have, and a state and its corporations and individuals, the private individuals within it, if none of them have dollar denominated debt, that's a society that doesn't need the dollar. In the case, but the sole exception is if they need oil, because they're not producing enough oil, but Russia doesn't have that problem. So in terms of like, what's the future of currency? That's the thing I'm thinking about. It's because I already know with the sanctions that have been released on Russia, they're setting up a lot of stuff to essentially make America into a financial prison where you won't be able to get financial stuff out. I have the distinct impression that their goal to get the U.S. to last past 2034 is to, essentially turn to an open air prison. And so like even now, like a lot of exchanges, international exchanges, you can't, you know, communicate with from inside the United States. And that's intentional by design. And, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, me being in Texas, in theory, you know, I could just have Bitcoin in a cold storage wallet and carry it over into Mexico and, you know, turn to like real currency over there. But yeah, it's just a thing to consider. It's like if one's going to be in the States, which is where I think I'm going to be. I mean, I've accepted I've been stuck here for years now. It's despite all three.
Try to hide your enthusiasm just for a second.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's the thing is like the good thing about this is that I've been able to talk a lot of family members and others out of coming to the States. Like there's no reason in the world once you try to come to the States, even if you have a legal pathway at this point, there's no reason to come here. Because if you come here, you're risking not being able to go back if they do really go full hog that I expect them to.
Right. Well, I expect that too, but I still want my future wife to get here. So,
exactly.
So still want my fiance to get here, and then I don't care if they shut it down. At least I'll be able to make babies.
Exactly.
Is that going well? Because I know that's difficult. You said she's, I think if I remember, German, correct?
Yeah, she's German Russian. I mean, the process is underway. So whenever I get word from the U.S. government,
hey, I'm just not to black pill you, but my wife is Korean. I've been living in Korea 8 years, and we're still waiting. But that's mostly due to the fact that we refused to get the jibby jab. So They at the time they wouldn't even let us visit the United States, even though she was married to me. So if she wanted to come visit my side of the family, she couldn't do it for like 3 years. So if they can do it with that, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be able to do it other means, even if it's digital. So
Absolutely. New World Disorder actually throws in an interesting comment here, and he says, when BRICS refuses USD, what happens? Because I can't wrap my head around that yet.
they won't.
Mhm.
BRICS will still trade in USD because it's the means in which they can trade with the West.
Mhm.
Their BRICS' entire argument from like the two main head honchos, Z and Putin, is that they want to trade in their national currencies for their national resources. So that means that they will trade in US dollar. They're just not going to put their debt in US dollars, which is how the US dollar gains its power. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. And so only that the only way it's going to harm the United States actually could benefit the United States, frankly, if we had competent leadership. Because right now, the way the US dollar has power is not because of what our natural resources, which we have plenty of in the United States. It's because, or our labor capital or anything else. It's all because of debt. We get all these countries in debt with US dollars, and that's how it has power. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. BRICS is going to do its thing. So.
Want to give a shout out to BMX 1966 threw in $10 on the Streamlabs. Thank you so much, brother, for that. Really appreciate all your support. And if anybody else wants to support the stream or throw in a question or comment, feel free to use Dono Chat, Streamlabs, or YouTube. Somebody mentioned, why don't I just move to Russia with her? Well, the problem with is I have other responsibilities, and who's going to watch out for my parents? Who's going to, look out for other people in my family? So it's not that easy because I'm needed in other places. It's just the providence we're all given. So if I was in a different situation, I'm sure I'd be open to something like that. But yeah. So where again is the line in the sand? Because you guys have been tippy-toeing around the topic, but do you have one? Or is it something that, you'll know when you come to it?
So
the moment they come in between me and the church.
Yeah, that's one.
Yeah, that's a good one, actually. Yeah, the moment they do become, well, I mean, let's just point out that masks were certainly an attempt to do that, of which I'm in the Antiochian jurisdiction, and Metropolitan Joseph basically conceded to the CDC, and so whatever the CDC said was the official Antiochian position. So I think I agree with that, and that's where the mask mandate, I refuse to participate in that in church, and that was a line in the sand for me. I stood in a adjacent room for like 8 months until the Metropolitan changed the ruling, of which my priest was not supportive of. But because the Metropolitan made it, it was issued by the bishop, and we had so many people in the church that were in favor of those measures. I stood in a separate room and received the Eucharist in a doorway from the sanctuary there. And, that was a line in the sand. At the same time, I put a mask on when I flew on airplanes, or if I had to go into a hospital at one time, so it's interesting, again, like where the line is. And you brought up the church. That's a great point.
That was where I put on a mask. It was when my wife was bleeding out with our second kid, and so the issue with her bleeding out is, of course, as you know, the blood supply is tainted. So anyway, so had to go in the hospital, do emergency C-section, and thank God she lost just underneath the threshold where she would have actually needed a blood transfusion. So and obviously, like, I'm not gonna just not visit my wife in the hospital, and
Right.
that's yeah.
The mask thing is puzzling for me. I understood what people's arguments were when they first started making those points, especially here in Korea, because mask wearing isn't actually uncommon here. They've been doing it for like 3 decades.
Anybody's been to Asia knows that. They do that all year round.
And they do it for the, the yellow dust stuff.
Right.
You're absolutely familiar with that. And so for me, I was like, okay, I can tolerate a little bit of it in certain public spaces. They never made it in our churches, so they didn't make it mandatory in our churches.
Good.
Though they didn't discourage it either. They're just like, kind of do what you want to do. I'm under the Moscow Patriarchate, just for clarification. And so I never really had that issue, but my thought process is intent. What is the intent? If they're wearing it because it's just like a cultural placebo effect, where it's like, hey, they've always done it, it's not a big deal. They're not doing it out of a sense of dishonor towards, or a if it doesn't have theological implications. My problem is that in the West, they were pushing it explicitly because they were suggestions that the Eucharist could pass on this stuff, that this illness could somehow destroy the church, blah, blah. You could get people sick and kill them. It's like, do we have not faith, right?
Right.
And so for me, that was my big line for the mask thing. I wasn't going to judge people that just wore it because it was kind of like a cultural milieu here, like Koreans. I wasn't going to go and chastise Koreans because I think that would do more harm to their faith than good. But in the West, I think people that capitulated, it was doing more harm to them by capitulating than not capitulating. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. That was my kind of thought process, the whole mask thing. But my big thing was for me, it was work. I actually had to tell my company, no, I'm not getting the jab. And they said, you have to submit all this documentation. And the thing that I realized, and this is something that people can take home, is especially with these bigger companies and the government and everything else, they're really bad at doing their jobs. They don't keep track of any of this stuff. And so literally they just asked me to submit the documentation and I just never submitted it. And they just kept on working for them. So like eventually I was like, hey, they forgot about it because they're lazy. These people are lazy and these systems require a lot. I mean, people say AI is going to fix it. It's not, because you have to have somebody that's interpreting the data. And so AI and all this stuff, mark of the beast stuff, I feel like eventually what we have to be worried about is when enough people are on board to actually implement the system. AI, I'm not actually worried about because I don't think we have the horsepower or the computing power to ever make it reasonable. So.
We got a question that came in from Tinfoil Hat Girl, throws in $5. Thank you so much, sister. She says, I think you are all wrong on Bitcoin. The DOJ is seizing wallets left and right, aka the Binance situation. I'm familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And the use through Operation Jaffe and Roar is creating an interoperability platform for all digital currency, whether it's CBDC or tokens.
But what specifically is she disagreeing with us about?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, because it sounds like that's kind of our position. I'm not sure.
Maybe putting trust in crypto even at all?
Yeah, maybe that.
I don't.
Tinfoil Hat Girl, if you're in the chat, feel free to clarify in the live chat, and I'll read that. Yeah, because I think our point was that we don't put full trust into Bitcoin long term. We're not crypto bros, but I think we're all agreeing that the fact that it's a digital currency is a problem in and of itself.
It builds on what Nicholas said about how having cash in hand changes your relationship with money. It's one thing. Okay, lines in the sand is one thing. The other question is like, okay, what can you do to put yourself in a position where you actually have options? Because the fact that I had no debt, even after me losing a company, during the COVID shutdown, I never had to I had the option of literally staying unemployed instead of, taking the jab to get a job, because I had no debt obligations whatsoever. And, I had savings that, for my family to live off of. So that's something to think about. Like, what is it that you can do to make yourself less in the system? And that's, it's for some people, it's kind of late in the game, but that's why, I've just very religiously avoid debt like a madman. It's because I know that if one has a debt obligation on oneself, that is a point of fragility, and it is something that can be easily used to pressure people into
Yeah.
doing things they wouldn't want to do.
Okay,
So-
here she clarified her comment. She said, "I think they're going to make Bitcoin the new gold standard."
Well,
Definitely
they may
not.
try, but at that point, it kind of defeats the purpose of the crypto in the first place. That was kind of the point that I think we were making earlier. I actually think we agree.
Yeah, they won't
Because
do it,
even if
though,
they
'cause-
do try and do it, it's not going to change anything.
Yeah, and they don't. Well, one, that's the same reason they don't have a gold standard. The state wants to have complete control of its currency. If you surrender your currency if you make your standard Bitcoin, like El Salvador did, congratulations, you no longer have a currency that you're sovereign over. And I don't see the New World Order types wanting to have a currency that they're not completely sovereign over.
So what do you
Yeah,
think
and-
about? And she said, she followed up by saying, just like the petrodollars.
Petrodollars is different. That's because the U.S. controls dollar supply, or rather, the U.S. banking system controls the dollar
Right.
supply, and how it's used, where it can go.
Mhm.
The thing with crypto is, as mentioned before, crypto is a limited, what do you call it? Limited number. So at some
Yeah.
point you're going to get deflation, which is not something they want. They actively, you look all the NWO types, WF, etc., or even reading the Federal Open Market Committee minutes, they're all terrified of deflation. And if you look at a deflationary period, an excellent example of deflationary period would be the 19th century, where you have a slow, steady deflation and rapid industrialization in the West. And that's what they're terrified of. It's because
Yeah, and that's why they took that's why World War One, and arguably, again, this is a history thing. I'm a history nerd. I was a history major before I got into IT, and World War One was the elites, or the parallel elite society, which were some people call the merchant class, taking the aristocratic class out of power because they did not like the rising tide of the lower class. They didn't like it because they saw it as a means of stripping them of power and influence. And so this is why they took Tsar Nicholas II out. This is why they took the Kaiser out. This is why the British stripped their monarch of any meaningful power. And we've talked about this in the past, I think, in other past live streams. That It's very clear to me that their means of control is going to be one that they can micromanage without having to put too much time into it. And so adapting any other system is going to be really, really tedious. They're going to want, like I said, I think the digital ID is probably the thing that I would be the most worried about. I would say avoid it if possible, but if not, just make sure you, like Miguel said, have an out, have an ability to be like, oof, I'm dipping from that, right? And I think that's important is people have.
Well, how
ways to
would,
get out.
again, the sort of theoretical position that I've created is, say you're a plumber, you're an
Mhm.
Orthodox guy in America, and you have a pretty solid business. You're able to have multiple employees and take care of your family. And let's say this economic transition happens with digital IDs and CBDCs. I mean, that person doesn't theoretically have an out.
The plumber would. Ironically, that would be a position that would, because
Okay, explain.
they can choose to go under the table and go gray market.
Well, what if
even
there's no
if
more
it's a business.
cash, though? What would?
I'll put it this way. Okay, so granted, this doesn't apply in Indiana, but in South Texas, New Mexico, if they got rid of cash, suddenly the Mexican peso is going to make a comeback, which is why they're not going to get rid of cash. At least not down here.
That's where we've been speculating about bricks. If that was a paper currency and they did do away with cash in the U.S. Now, the state of Indiana and Texas, I think, are the two that have like banned digital coins for currency. So I'm glad about that. But let's just say they did try to do away with an actual U.S. paper dollar. Something has to fill the void. That's the thing that I think when I talk with some people who are a little bit more black-pilled, they think they're just going to have total control and there'll just be a void in opposition to it. But that can't occur. Something is going to take its place.
Yeah, I suspect that, and frankly, I tell people this. It's like the countries, and this is not investment advice, but I would just say look at the countries that BRICS is getting involved with. Those are the countries that you want to make sure that you have some sort of fingers in. You want to make sure that you're at least watching that, because I feel like he was saying, the peso make a huge comeback, but also I feel smaller countries like El Salvador and things like that, they'll be able to get by with this because they can survive because they have such a small population that they're not really that interested in micromanaging that. El Salvador, as good as much as it's improving under Bukele, if that's how you say his name, it's still in the end of the day, it is still a subservient nation to wider powers. He's just doing enough that it's improving his nation, but also not stepping on any toes too overtly. Because we all know they would do regime change in El Salvador in a heartbeat if they felt it was an actual like meaningful threat to their hegemony. So.
Right. I wanted to clarify for Tinfoil Hat Girl said they want to dollarize Bitcoin. They have done white papers on it. R3, which was hosted to the forefront by SBF, is a major operation with the use. Are you guys familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
Not enough to comment.
Yeah, I'm not either. Sorry, Tinfoil Hat Girl, we're not familiar with that, but do appreciate the support and point taken. I think we agree to the point that you believe Bitcoin is going to be used by the globalists. And I think there's an argument there. Again, I was just looking at Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan, and depending on the month, they have positive things and then negative things to say about it. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're just trying to buy up most of the market to utilize it for something. So that makes sense to me. Behold the Chalice throws in $1 and says, as our situation worsens, knowing what to assist, what to resist, and what to suffer could become paradoxically easier and harder. Easier for the faithful because of the increasing contrast between good and evil, but harder for the faithless. It's an interesting point.
It's all a means of our salvation in the end as Orthodox. Going through it and suffering and trying to combat this stuff. I mean, this is not going to be any different than when the early church was under the oppression of Rome. In fact, it's probably going to be easier, honestly, and we should be thankful that it's going to be easier. It's going to be difficult in different ways, but I feel like in the end, it's going to be really come down to, do you want to live a poor life where you don't get access to all the goodies? Or do you want to live a comfortable life? I think that's the decision that's going to be the difficult one for a lot of us to make, is that are we willing to accept poverty for our principles? Yeah. Whereas at least in the early church, it was like, are you willing to be flayed alive? You know what I mean? Yeah. Things like that.
Right.
That's the distinction. And I think people need to kind of keep that in perspective as well, is that it's not going to be like it could be. I'm not going to make I'm not Nostradamus or anything like that, but not a prophet, but I don't think it's going to be as bad as the early church in terms of like life and death. I think it's going to be an acceptance that we may have to live in poverty, Right. I think that might be the reality.
It'll be economic and psychological.
Yeah, Frankie D throws in $5 and says, America is the mad brute. Certainly seems that way for sure. And then Behold the Chalice threw in another $1, and he was continuing with his comment in regards to potentially it being easier for people with faith. And I agree, Nicholas, you make a great point. I've done streams. I didn't speak to it specifically here, but our salvation does depend on where we resist. And that's kind of the point, is where's the line in the sand? Because it's really difficult, and it's not the same for every person. But Behold the Chalice throws in another $1 and says, the prince of this world has already set the mark of the beast on their forehead, so to speak, by distorting their perception of reality and inclining them toward evil. Our challenge is to avoid being deceived by their perverse passions and panic.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I can't really disagree in per se. I think, again, we are in, it's easy to get black-pilled. It's very easy to get black-pilled. And I think too many young people, especially the Gen Z, I'm a millennial, just a little bit younger than David here. And it's not, I think that a lot of young people need to take a breath and just make sure that they're systematically approaching this and kind of saying, hey, I got to have a plan for the future. That's what you really need to do. I know it sucks to say it that way. Like there is no golden like goose egg that's going to fix all this, but it's like, man, you just need to hunker down and do the hard work.
Yeah.
And it sounds so boomer too, you know, because your parents or your boomer parents are all like, just pull up your bootstraps and get to work. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of what you got to do.
And the thing is, if you know history, you can't really be black-pilled. Like today, you know, I was talking with some Ukrainians about their experience in the 90s, where like literally there's no food, there's no money. How do you live when there's no food or there's no money? You know, they just had, you know, they had the dacha life, and you know, you just embrace being broke and you make sure you get food out of the ground. You know, you have chickens for eggs, not so much for meat production. If you have a cow, it's for milk and not so much for meat. That's essentially the choice that a lot of us are going to have here in the States. Like I don't expect crazy, like where there's literally no food, like there was in you know, the 90s, Ukraine and Russia. But I do expect food prices to, like, they do intentionally want to jack up food prices higher.
Right.
And it's a matter of, you know, that's why, like, you know, part of why, you know, recent moves that I've made, it's what can I do so I can have more real estate to work with in terms of gardening, learning. And even right now, the thing is, like, gardening is not easy. Like, it's a skill set. You got to learn it over time. Like I did it with my dad, but a lot of that was landscaping for beauty, for, you know, like mansions. Growing for food is a completely different skill set, but there's some things that cross over. But like, you know, for like, you know, my project for this year's gardening, besides of course like doubling the size of how much I'm growing, is, you know, getting into drip irrigation, and just like, that's the thing, like start small. You know, just grow a pepper plant. You know, if you're down here in, you know, Texas, grow jalapenos or something. Just start small and start from there, and, you know, grow what you can. In this case, you know, grow what you can. Or if you're not someone who really has a touch for gardening, another great thing, and this will actually save you money, is canning. If you can, you can buy food on bulk when it's on sale. Can it all away, and you're good for a year. That is actually one way to fight the rising food prices. And that's actually something I do expect, where there'll be food, but what you want may not necessarily be there, and you'll see a return to more, you know, the fruit, etc., being available is going to be more seasonal. Especially if energy prices increase, then what do you call it? Like greenhouses, etc., are going to become less doable, and so you will be living the way St. Paisios wanted, where you only eat stuff that's in season instead of trying to get around the seasons that God created.
Right.
But, you know, that was him ranting. So,
well, I totally agree, and that was a point that I guess that's been a line in the sand for myself in regards to toxic food. So here in the United States, we have tons of food. Again, even when my fiance was here, she was blown away by the amount of choices we have. But unfortunately, a vast majority of those choices are actually toxic. And, you know, that's one of the things I'm most depressed about of my fellow American, is if you just go out in public, how fat people are and how unhealthy they are. It's pretty disappointing. But the toxic food, that's, again, another personal choice, because that was really the point of where the line in the sand is. That's one that all of us can make, is eating better quality food. And as Jose said, moving towards an understanding that we're probably going to have to garden, grow our own food. If you're able, potentially have a well where you're on your own water system. But toxic food is one, I guess, I didn't write down, but one that I've already written a sort of line in the sand there, just to become healthy. And so I don't have to go to these morgues called hospitals.
Yeah. Well, you know, actually, two points on that. Actually, one, I think something easy for people that don't have a lot of space to get into. People are like, oh, how can I get chickens? Well, chickens require a little bit of space. Go grouse, or quail. Sorry, quail. Quail eggs. They lay almost as many eggs as chicken. They're smaller, but they're denser in nutrients. So, and they're smaller, little chickens basically. So they take up way less space, and they're way less maintenance. That's one thing. The second thing is I think that what people also don't understand is that as Orthodox, I think it's more and more important every single day that we make overt efforts to be as nepotistic as possible. And what I mean by that is keep it within the Orthodox community, keep money flowing within the Orthodox community, support Orthodox, not just content creators, Orthodox businesses, Orthodox farm producers. Like if you want to start gardening and you have a surplus and you can it, go to your parish and say, hey, for a few bucks, can people take this off my hands? Keep that money within, and that's going to help us kind of survive that kind of onslaught that's going to come with this digital ID stuff and other things, because we'll be able to say, hey, if you have a few extra chickens you're butchering, give me a couple breasts, I'll give you some of my apple tree. Things like that are simple, easy ways, and you have to start doing it now. And that includes carpentry, includes everything. I think we really need to start systematizing this. I don't know how we do that, but even something as simple as a website where Orthodox businesses can go onto and like register, like
Right.
something. We have to have a marketplace of some sort that we can start keeping the money in
Well, that's
community.
already, yeah. I know some people that are already beginning to work on that here in the United States, at least. So many people have put that in, or at least come to that same conclusion. And I know people behind the scenes that are wanting to really build something rigorous, where no matter where you're at in the United States, you can choose your state and then find what Orthodox business owners control. It could be plumbing. You know, you're out in upstate New York. Hey, you're an hour and a half away, but I'll pay a little extra for you to come do my plumbing at my house.
Yeah.
We had a super chat come in from Behold the Chalice. I want to read that before the two others that just came in. He was referring back to the mark of the beast and the spiritual war and said, the way to avoid the mark of the beast is to already have the mark of God. The line in the sand has never changed on the royal path and in the true church. Well, to a degree, I accept, but I do think the lines in the sands are changing a bit in regards to the state of the world. But I get your point in regards to the faithfulness in the church has always been the same. But thank you so much, brother. Behold the Chalice. Ian, I really appreciate your support, brother. God bless you and the family. And then we had two come in over here on YouTube. Eli Hernandez threw in $5, says, are Orthodox allowed to go after these NWO people with kinetic force? Apologize for the provocative question, but I don't want to go without a fight. I'll let you guys respond. My initial response is no. We don't. Orthodoxy is not an attacking belief system, so it's very defensive. And so the fight has already begun. The fight is your sins. The fight is, are you doing your daily prayers? The fight is, which parish do you belong to? The fight is making sure you are becoming man enough to support a wife and children. So those things I think are in our personal decisions, and that's sort of empowering. But I don't know if Orthodox people is the framework. Certainly there's forces. I mean, obviously the tensions with Russia and the West are somewhat related to this, but, and obviously the Orthodox Church supports the country of Russia and what they're doing. But I don't think Orthodox people should be going on a crusade for our politicians here in the U.S. I think that actually backfire and probably be worse for us. But what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Just because I'm
There-
related to Ellie.
Yeah, there's a distinction. There's a distinction between people that live in an Orthodox nation or an Orthodox infused culture in like Eastern Europe and Russia, and a difference between people living in the West. That is a sad reality. And I think that what we have to acknowledge is that we don't live in a culture where the people, Orthodox, have the ability to rise up in rebellion. Not that we should. I don't believe we have a rebellious spirit, but we just don't have. It's a practicality issue, but also it's just a numbers game too. It's practicality and numbers. We don't have that ability, and also it's not really the duty of a person to go down swinging per se. It's for the church and a nation who has been transformed by the Holy Spirit and by the culture of Orthodoxy to do this on our behalf. That's what the church is there for. That's why the Symphonia was so important in the early church, because the state took that out of our hands. It took that decision-making power out of our hands. It's like, do I have to go and murder this person to defend myself? No, the state is there with the support of the church to defend my ability to maintain my orthodoxy, which is that I don't want to have to go out of my way and do that. We don't have that luxury in the States. So I would say, unless your life is threatened, you probably should.
Or your church, right? So this is a point where I would say in the West that, like, that is my battle line, right? If I'm going to die in a sort of figurative battle, it is in the protection of my family and my church and my parish. So that's where it gets back to a line in the sand, is any sort of involving of the state between us and our church. I think that is a battle line. And that's where, again, I always use the metaphor, you can kind of stand up against the church with your back against it, because you have something to fight for. So, we have our own homeland. I'm American. That's where, even if I went to Russia, no matter how much Russian I learn, I'm not Russian. I'm American. We have our homeland, but I think the church gives us a fort. It gives us something of defense. It gives us a place of refuge. But Jose, do you have anything on this topic?
Yes, I do. So the thing is, take into account. So there is a distinction between, the individual and the state, or in this case, like a form of like a monarchy. The question is, like, who has the blessing to wield the sword? And, and Paul talks about that in Romans 13. And the fact is, it's not me. It's not Nicholas. It's not David, and it's not you, Ellie. None of us are anointed monarchs. And that's the other part too. So, like, in terms of, okay, so when is it where, responding to NWO people with kinetic force, there is an example in Russian history of this at the end of the time of troubles. So the Poles overrun all of Russia, actually conquer it. And that was Vladislav IV, Polish king, who pulled that off. He essentially pulled off what the crusaders that Saint Alexander Nevsky of Novgorod. So those Teutonic crusaders, what they failed to do, Vladislav succeeded in doing. But he was, the reason why he was not made czar. So the thing was, almost the entire boyar class was down to have him as czar, because they were completely exhausted by the time of troubles, the civil war that was going on in Russia for a long while at that point. So the entire warrior class was completely exhausted, and they couldn't afford to fight anymore. And so they were down to. So the first deal with Vladislav was, okay, we'll recognize you guys as we'll make you czar as long as you let us keep our faith. Vladislav said no. Everyone has to submit to the Pope, and the boyar class was ready to sell out the faith. And then Patriarch, Saint Hermogenes, Patriarch of Moscow, he refused to sign any document unless Vladislav converted to Orthodoxy. And he was threatened by the boyars with death, etc. And Hermogenes wrote letters out to the peasantry, the Russian peasantry, and he was like, okay, so if Vladislav becomes czar, we will all be forced in the Pope, which means we'll all be cut off from the sacraments. Y'all and your children and children's children will be damned. And lo and behold, you had a massive peasant uprising, which kicked the Poles out of Russia. So this is how stupid the Poles were. They actually had an opportunity to have all of Russia under their control, and they threw it out because they just had to go crusading. This peasant rebellion essentially made it impossible for the Poles to hold it, and they fled. So I think Saint Hermogenes died. I don't remember. He was beaten and starved to death. So he died from it, but the Russian nation was saved in that sense. So the thing is, it's different when you have a nation that is Orthodox, when you have that, because that's not something any of us have. Like, America is not Orthodox. El Salvador, Colombia, Mexico, none of these places are Orthodox. There is no, because if you want to think of it in terms of hierarchy of things, like hierarchy of loyalty. So patriotism is loyalty to one's fathers.
Yep.
So if you want to look at a truly traditional society, and I'm like, people think of nationalism as being traditional, and it isn't. So you go back to Christendom, pre-schism Christendom, first millennium. You have what is it that people would fight for? I mean, things that people would fight for would be, one, for their local town, community, their parish. They would fight for their family, and they would fight for their liege lord. You didn't have, like, even in the Reconquista, you didn't none of those troops who fought in the Reconquista in Spain were fighting for the purpose of an abstract concept called Spain. it was directly personal relationships that they had with their family, with their liege lord, and of course with the person of Jesus Christ in the church. And if you look at the Roman Empire, you see the same thing. You were fighting, in the Byzantine Empire or the Roman Empire, you were fighting for the emperor.
Right.
You were fighting for the church. It was not in defense of the church. It was not this. What do you call it? It was not every man just take up a sword and do your own thing.
Ideological.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not ideological, and it's also a matter of obedience.
And that's where it looks like there's some disagreement in the chat, claiming that it's weak if we're only defensive. But the point that's being made is what exactly is offensive in the situation that we find ourselves in the West. Because if you're looking for a militia, that's not the church. But if you believe that the problems that we're facing in the West is spiritual, then the church is the front line and it is a militia.
Right. And that's the other thing too. So in terms of, this is actually a very American thing, honestly, the idea that defensive is weakness. And the reason I want to point this out is, so America has been in offensive wars every single year of its existence, except for 16. So, and that's all the Indian wars, Spanish American wars, a bunch of wars that the U.S. was involved in Latin America that no one remembers anymore. Maybe some people remember the invasion of Panama in '89. But yeah, the America has been constantly in offensive wars its entire existence, and it has completely exhausted itself. Russia's been around for 1,000 years. They fell to the Bolsheviks, but they recovered. China, that's been around for 4,200 years. China was not an offensive empire in its history. Empires that go crazy offensive, they burn themselves out.
Well, and I think it's a different emphasis on like the battle that we're fighting. So if offensive, in my opinion, is like trying to build parallel systems, directories for Orthodox businesses, to me, that's offensive. But if you're talking about something more militia related, then we're not on the same page, even though we may be on the same values. I just don't see how that is beneficial long term. It just seems very short focused.
Well, if we look at the history of revolutions, they don't turn out good for the immediate people in those places. You look at the French Revolution, you look at the American Revolution. Look how many young men died because of a 2% tax, right? And because they were salty about not having their representative vote.
Right.
Was it worth it? That's up for you to decide. But for me, I would say if I were in that, if you were to take me now and plug me in now, knowing what I know now, I would say it's not worth it, guys. All those young lives died. It's the same thing with like World War I and all these other things. We have to ask ourselves, when is these revolutionary concepts and these revolutionary values that we have adopted as Americans, because of that's our founding stock, our founding kind of belief system was in revolution. In fact, we have it instilled in our Constitution that the people can, in theory, rise up, right? It doesn't really pan out the way you think it's going to pan out.
So again,
that's what I would say. Let off the gas.
Some of the comments. So Weirdo John, thanks for being here. He's a bit critical of our position. He says it's not about weakness. It's about being steps ahead. If you're on defense, then you've already taken a step back and we'll be fighting an uphill battle. But that's not necessarily true either. And the line in the sand is the church. So that's the front line. And you never take a step back. And so the point of like going out and dominating American culture or something, that's not a battle that I believe we win. And that's not the fight that I'm fighting.
And it's also the nature, like I was just going to say, the nature of military offensives. The key is logistics. You need logistics chain to support said offensive, and you need an economic base, an industrial base that is supplying said offensive. So if you're thinking about it in terms of militia, the reason why militias in America are not going to do anything to the federal government is because how many of these militias have their own ammo production? Just keeping it basic, their own vehicle production, their own all that fun jazz. Like if you want to have a hope in the future of having a successful quote unquote offensive, you actually have to build something that can actually support a standing army, which is why I'm someone who's expected the United States to break up since 2007. The fact is, that's why I look at what are the state governments doing in regards to developing their own economies, developing their own currencies or potential for currency, developing their own private militaries. And the only one who's really been serious about that has been Texas. what do you call it? Like the idea that, just a bunch of random, literally in this case, a bunch of random peasants are going to be able to, who are a tiny minority, to stop the federal government. The reason why I brought up that Russian example of St. Hermogenes is because that is a rare example of a peasant rebellion that worked. And the reason that peasant rebellion that worked is because they already had infrastructure in place. They already had an alternate system of governance that the king of Poland was not able to touch, and that was the church. Like the church itself has a
I got to
diocesan.
get going, by the way. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem. God bless, brother. Take it easy.
Got it, Nicholas. So it's like what the necessary conditions that were needed for a peasant rebellion, they do not exist in the United States whatsoever. And if you want one to exist, the best thing you can do is invest in growing your parish and event. That's raise children. Like that's the best way to do it.
I'm huge on that, and that's where even Eli, who asked the earlier super chat, I'm specifically referring to getting rid of those whose evil is far reaching. Well, how do you get rid of them? And if you choosing to personally do that, if that's going to jeopardize your salvation, is that worth it? Is that the battle that we're fighting? Exactly. If in regards to building all, parallel systems and opportunities for our fellow faithful, I'm all for it. And I would consider that as offensive. But my point is, I'm never going to take a step back from the front line of the church and what we believe. That's why I have my stream and talking about the beliefs I believe in. That is the ultimate. Welcome, Jack. That is the ultimate point. And to me, that's the battle that I see myself fighting, and protecting my family and my church is basically the battle. So everything outside that, not that I'm not in favor of people defending themselves, but I think that any sort of actual militaristic offensive is doomed to fail and actually sets back many of the people that might be a part of it. That's my personal opinion. But welcome, Jack. And then Johnson in a $3.69 super chat says, brother, please take 10 seconds to pray for me, John. Really struggling to lose weight and not have to wear my sin on my sleeve. Just welcome to newborn and don't want to be a fat dad. God bless you and your work. Well, God bless you, John. And I will say a prayer for you tonight in regards to your weight journey. And our good brother, Logan Daly, throws in $10. Thank you so much, Logan Daly, for all your support. He says, just doing my nepotistic duty. Well, thank you for that nepotistic duty. I do appreciate it. Welcome, Jack. We're actually going to be winding things down. We're already 2 hours and a half in, but if you want to share your perspective on the topic, I'm not sure how much of the stream you've caught.
I tuned in late, but I heard the parts that stood up to me was that the church is where the battle, that's the path. That's the line of defense. What I offered in the chat, my perspective, our enemy, it's not the flesh and blood. Our enemy is the systems, the false belief systems that have men and women lying to each other. And it's time for us to, I believe, followers of Christ, we unite together as the church, together as the body, and we can bring the light to the world and overcome the darkness and the corruption that has caused mankind to go to war with each other.
Right.
So,
and the thing that, and I think you'd agree, the thing that we're fighting is ultimately evil, and that is a spiritual battle, which all of us then have to fight on our own. And that's really what Orthodoxy is all about, is realizing that you're the first, you're the greatest of all sinners. And then working on that as a sort of ripple effect in society. I know that's not what people like to hear. That's not what gets the young bucks excited, but ultimately that is the truth.
And finding that problem, identifying the problem is the first step to bringing correction. And as the biggest problems, we can become the solution. We can help each other overcome the darkness. And
so Eli asks a clarifying question. He says, I'm into my salvation, just curious as to the options to use force against people who wish to do us harm. Well, if people are wishing to do you harm, and they're, for example, a burglar breaks into your home and is threatening the life of your children, it's actually your salvific duty to defend them. So is that offensive or is that defensive? I would consider it defensive. If somebody transgress your private property, comes into your home, is threatening the lives of your children or your wife or your family, yeah, you're able to take lethal force. You may be out of communion with the church for a year or so until they've deemed, but you know, that is orthodoxy. But that is the defensive masculinity of that. Once the boundaries are transgressed, there is a fight. But so yeah, Eli, your salvation wouldn't be in jeopardy necessarily if you defended somebody who is transgressing boundaries. But if you were to proactively go out and hunt down the people that you deem to be evil, I think that would be jeopardizing your salvation. You guys have any comments on that? I know you joined late, Jack. We appreciate you jumping on, but we're right around that 2.5 hour mark. You guys have any comments on that or anything that we've already said?
Even in history, if you look at successful, conquests, if you want to look at that, whether it be the Roman Empire or Spain, it's not the guys who are running around trying to, take out the caliph that succeed. You got to build something that is worth, it's the truth is, like, it really is, it comes down to you and your walk in the faith. It really does matter. If one strives to conquer, to master their passions and to grow in, to grow in Christ, the fruit of that is what will give a foundation for future generations. Even what you see it in the Spanish Reconquista, you see it in the Roman Empire, and you see it in Russia even today. The fact is, why is it that Russia is able to withstand the NWO the way they are, and why is it that they're the ones taking the lead instead of, for example, China with Xi Jinping? And the reason is because Russia has a huge, ginormous, unmatched number of new martyrs that are interceding for it, that are interceding for their people. And that's something to take into account. It really is, the faith really is the cornerstone, even in terms of state formation. Like, people talk about, being a monarchist. It's like, yeah, sure. No, I'm definitely like, monarchy is the way to go. But the thing is, even just looking at the history of how do monarchies come about, altar always comes before throne. Temple always comes before the palace. You see that in the Old Testament. You see that in Sumerian history. You see that in Egypt, in China, in Japan, and Iran, and you even see that, of course, in the Christian kingdoms. It's strong church is what results in a strong church, a strong a nation that has, or even in the case of like a Spain, which was like a multitude. It's cousin ethnicities that were all allied together with one strong local synod holding them together. But you have that strong faith center. That is what will produce a strong state. And that's
Right.
why, for even interview, Putin's talking about, like, the fact is, Ukrainians and the Russians are one soul because they have the same faith. That is why Zelensky and company and those who sponsor him and the United States have been trying to undermine Orthodoxy. That's why the
Right.
U.S. has been pushing all these fake churches, like the fake Belarusian church, the fake Ukrainian church.
Right.
It was a fake church they were trying to push in, was it Montenegro, or was it, I forget which country, but
It's
a
one of
country
those.
that is, it's another country it's literally,
I think it was Lithuania.
Lithuania too, yeah. But
Yeah.
there's also, like, in the Balkans, there's a people group, I forget which ones there are, but they're literally Serbian, and the United States has been trying to tell them they're not Serbs, they're something else. And of course, part of that is they want to create a church for these people to separate them from the Serbian church.
Right.
And that's the key. Like, you're not in 16th century Russia where you're going to get your peasant rebellion. The spiritual foundation is not there for something like that, to defend the fatherland. You're not in 8th century Spain where you're following Pelayo and you're gearing up for a reconquista of that which is rightfully yours and rightfully God's. We are in, those of us in the States, we are in the first 3 centuries of the Roman Empire, of Christianity in the Roman Empire, when the empire is pagan. And the fact is, the American state, the federal state specifically, established, was it 1789 with the U.S. Constitution? That state was Masonic, and that state today, it's still wholly,
Masonic, yeah.
Masonic and satanic.
Yeah.
This is not,
Well, this plays into the next comment that I starred, and it was from New World Disorder. Thank you, brother, again, for being here and participating in the conversation. He was, again, a little bit more in favor of an offensive. And he said, I see their point, meaning us. The Bible says to obey the government in several instances, but at what moral point does that contract end? And that, again, gets back to what we're saying. Once it violates our Orthodox faith, that contract ends. But right now, we, as Jose highlighted, you can say that the U.S. government is Masonic and even satanic, but I still am able to practice my Orthodox faith inside the United States. So at that point, I'm still under, the law of Caesar, and must give Caesar what is Caesar's. But until it comes to a point where they won't let me practice my Orthodox Christian faith, that is a line in the sand, and that is a defensive. That's not offensive in my framework of it. But that's not also, and you may disagree, New World Disorder, that's totally fine. But I don't think that's a weakness. I think it's a strength, because as Jose gets back to, it's a spiritual thing. And so if we're actually spiritually aligned with the Trinity and we're willing to die for that, as opposed for the Masonic satanic American agenda, then I think that's a worthy cause. So I get your point, and I think we're not too far away of disagreement. But I appreciate you being here. And I would say that's when our obligation to obey the government ends, is when we can no longer be Christians, Orthodox Christians.
Mm-hmm. And if you want, like other cases, it's also where if the government actively forbids you from meeting a duty that you have. So like, for example, so as a father, you have a duty to feed your kids. If the tax burden in a state, let's just say California, because neither of us are there, if the tax burden is so high that you working a job legally, paying your taxes and everything means you don't have enough food for your kids, and you find yourself, you have to take, side gigs that pay cash under the table so you can put food on the table. I'll just say, like, I know a lot of people have been in that position where it's like, they can choose, you either take that work that's gray market, or your kids don't eat.
Right.
That example.
Right.
Where you have a duty as a father to your children. You don't, if the government makes it impossible for you to meet your obligations, that's distinct. But of course, you don't start a revolution to overthrow the California state government. It's more like you're literally just you're skirting laws so that you can meet your obligations that you have to those who are under your care.
Right. And he responded by, the world will never become fully Orthodox. Utopia is a lie, as we know, but never let the enemy define your ways or have you act. Well, I agree with that. And as Orthodox, we don't believe in utopia this side of eternity. It is until Christ comes back. So the prophecies that many in the Orthodox Church believe will come to fruition is like St. Paisios believes there'll be a golden age of Orthodoxy spreading around the world. Doesn't mean everybody's going to become Orthodox. It means everybody's going to have the opportunity if they truly wanted it. And then the persecution is going to come in stronger and stronger as we move towards the end time. So I am in no way a utopian. I believe things are going to get a lot harder, and we're going to move closer towards the end times myself. So, but I do believe in a golden age, and I think maybe the internet and what's happening online, maybe we're right at the beginning of a 2-decade-long golden age of Orthodox growth around the world. It's very possible. So anyways, New World Disorder, I don't disagree with you to some degree, but yeah, he said be proactive, not responsive.
That is true.
And I would say being Orthodox is proactive, but again, it depends on how we define it.
Yeah, and being proactive, lift weights, take cold showers, learn some gardening skills, learn some canning, learn a skill that you don't depend on computers for.
Yeah, exactly. Skill. It's all about skill. So anyways, Jose, thank you so much, brother. We're going to wind down the stream. We're going to shut it off here. I appreciate you hopping on. I want to give a special thanks to all the supporters, Logan Daly, Eli Hernandez, Petra Garde, Frankie D, Blue Skittle, Slowboy Whiteboard, MyTech23, Ortho Cube, welcome, Young Old Boy, and John, I'll say a prayer for you tonight. And thank you, Behold the Chalice, for your support. And shout out to Tinfoil Hat Girl and BMX 1966. So, guys, that's going to do it for me. Smash that like. I will be back, like I said, Thursday evening, God willing, to do a stream covering the migration period of the Roman Empire and the fall of the West. So you will see me then. As always, until next time, God bless.